Sword of Coming Chapter 921. Zhang Li Changming took the millet grains and wandered around. Qin Pingan took a walk with Jia Xing and asked with a smile, "You still adapt to your current status, right?" Jia Xing immediately bowed his hand and said with great emotion, "Thanks to the great importance of the mountain master, I was lucky enough to be able to occupy an important position. I was trembling, not the slightest slack, and I didn't dare to superfluous. Smile more, talk less, do less, show up. Am always shallow, and am a little dragon gate, not to mention it is to send charcoal in the snow for the wind and kite fairy, it is the icing on the cake and it may not be done, so I think I will not miss things. Take another step and take another step, try to do my best for Luapa Mountain, and I can't let down the high hopes of the mountain owner." Luapashan Zhanglu Changming and God of Wealth Wei Wenlong are temporary helpers on the Fengyuan ferry, and will return to Luapashan only after the next celebration is over. According to Cui Dongshan's arrangement, the ferry boat is actually in charge of Jia Sheng and Zhang Jiazhen, the accountant. The Fengyuan ferry crosses 3 continents and passes through a total of 17 ferry crossings. Only the Tonggishao at the foot, including the Lingbai Mountain Yayandu and Daquan Tayedu, there are as many as 7 ferry crossings. Ride a wind kite ferry to enjoy the panoramic view of the rivers and mountains. Just like an emperor riding in the wind, I saw countless green hills worshipping grass. Located on the north-south line of the Haoran world, from the northernmost, the Chongxian Department Yunshao Palace of the Deyuan dynasty, to the southernmost Kashandu, the ferry walked down like this. Jia Xing has never seen any gods on the mountain. The god of wealth of Ma Zong Wei Yusong now wants to call himself Brother Jia, and the fairies of Changchun Palace, the land of the capital, and the screams of Jia Daochang made the old god's heart warm. Not to mention that there are no more than 5 great mountain monarchs in the Aquarius Island. Among them, the Beiwa mountain monarch Weibo is his own family. It is recognized that Piyun Mountain is a mountain with a pair of pants on Luapa Mountain. No need to say more. The monarch of Zhongyue Mountain Jinqing, and the female monarch of Nanyue Mountain Fanjun Mao, Jia Xing is now familiar with both of them. Qin Pingan nodded and said, "I know more in my heart and say less in my mouth." Old immortal Jia was taken aback and sighed, his face matched the groaning sound, it can be described as fluent and flowing. While talking for a long time, it is still not as insightful as the Mountain Lord. Jia Sheng is already quite strenuous as a fairy, but the Mountain Lord is only because of his lack of temperament. There is no dispute in the world, only the sight of 2 mountains and 2 sects, which restricts the hands and feet of the Mountain Master. Otherwise, in Jia Sheng's opinion, as long as the Mountain Master himself is willing, he will be the real fire dragon of Aquarius Island and of Tonggishao Fu Lu Yuxian also convinced the public. Qin Pingan didn't talk at all, and immediately changed the subject and asked, "Where is Bai Xian?" Jia Sheng smiled while stroking his beard and replied softly, "I'm on the boat. I should be in retreat right now. Otherwise, I would have heard the news and rushed to see the Mountain Lord. Compared to Luapa Mountain, we are the little hidden official. To practice swordsmanship requires too much diligence. It may be that he is holding his breath and does not want to be separated by King Sun Chun of his age. Lord, to be honest, I am looking forward to the Luapa Mountain and Shindu Mountain 100 years later. Every time I think about it, I feel proud to be among them and I feel a little bit of pain in the boats and cars. What's more, when I go north and south on this road, I actually stay on the kite boat, lying down and enjoying the blessing which is said to be running around and toiling. Am not ashamed of talking." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "I don't have a lot of hands, I don't care a lot. It's still very hard. I believe that the long life of the palm is in my eyes." Jia Sheng was speechless for a long time and murmured, "How can he see the Lord of the Mountain?" This sentence is really not the old fairy Jia's beard and horse. It is indeed a sincere statement from the heart and soul. There are 2 great things in life: early wisdom for small people and late blessings for always. One depends on the accumulation of virtue in the previous life, and the other depends on the good deeds in this life. Qin Pingan asked, "On the other side of the mountain crossing, Yu Guizhong enshrines Wang Ji and Su Hao, the Lu family of Aizhou. What kind of people do you think they are?" Jia Sheng carefully pondered his words. Wang Ji is a Confucian student, with a strong personality and straightforward speech, while that Su De Jiangxian, looking at his cold temperament, is not easy to approach but has a warm heart. Whoever makes friends can trust life and death as long as they are friends. Wang Ji was not a monk cultivated by Yu Guizhong himself. He was once the most ruthless one of Tong Yes's scolding Jiang Shangzhen. He never thought that he would eventually become the ancestor hall of Yu Guizhong. It is said that the contemporary Lord Wei Ying personally invited Wang Ji to go there. Jiu Yifeng. Su Hao, who was nicknamed Su Jun, was a 200-year-old swordsman from Jianghu, who was guarding Liu's sword at Kishandu on behalf of Liu's family in Iazhou. In a high-level discussion, the assault was violent without warning. If it weren't for Su Hao to take the lead with a sword to stop him, he would join a Jin Jiaz's boundary Wufu to stop Wanyan Liaojing's defiance, otherwise those of the earthly monks. The number of casualties, I am afraid, will at least double. By then the Battle of Jinjiazu will only become more erosive, and maybe the war may take advantage of the trend and affect Wuxiazu in the north. Qin Pingan said, looking back to help you introduce a Taoist expert from Dragon Tiger Mountain. This old man just happened to be attending our sect celebration. Jia Sheng first made a call with the mountain lord to express his gratitude, and then curiously asked, could it be a Huangzi nobleman from the Heavenly Master's mansion? With the current identity of the mountain lord, it is nothing to know a Huangzi nobleman. Maybe he has met and talked with the contemporary great celestial masters and is worthy of being a Taoist friend. Qin Pingan smiled and said, after the fire dragon resigned, it was this old man who served as the great celestial master of Longhushan. The surname was Liang Mingshuang. There are not many people who know about Tushenzhou. In Tonggishao, Mr. Liang did a feat that is only spread on the top of the mountain. The old man and the former Tianshifu are old friends, so contemporary the celestial master is on the side of the old real person, and he also needs to hold the ceremony of the younger generation. Jia Sheng's heart trembled and he stopped quickly, hit a door-to-door chief and said in a deep voice, Fu Shou Wu Yi Tianzun. You must know that Jia Sheng practiced with one thunder method, but compared to the 5 thunder method in Dragon and Tiger Mountain, which is known as the authentic 10,000 laws, the ancestral thunder method in the line of the mountain where Jia Sheng is located is very reluctant to say that the other side is very reluctant. Therefore, to be able to meet a great celestial master of Longhushan's surname is of great significance to this blind old Taoist, and it is more than just a matter of face. Jia Sheng smiled and said, Mountain Lord, when Mi Dajian succeeds in breaking through the realm, we will start to scare others again. A fairyland sword repairman said that he was famous for Jiuzhou, which is not too much. Wei Ying, the Yuguazang lord of Tonggishao, and Baishang, the first person in the northern land of Luzhou, is now in this realm of Kendo. Qin Pingan joked, then it will be difficult for us to use Mi Dajiangxian to tease Mi Dajiangxian. Jia Sheng laughed, really regretful. After separating from Jia Sheng, Qin Pingan temporarily changed his route and did not go to Zhang Jiazhen's accountant first. Jiang Chu is reading a book repeatedly. There are signs and characters on the pages. It is the old real man Huan Yun who served as the chief consecration of Yunshang City. He summarized Fullest experience into a book. Therefore this not thick book can be regarded as Huan Yun's life. With painstaking effort in accordance with the mountain's rules, I am afraid that even a direct disciple may not receive this treatment. Hearing the knock on the door, after Jiang went to open the door, he was surprised that it turned out to be the hermit. Having been in Luapa Mountain for so many years, the chances of chatting alone are few and far between, as the hidden officer has been away all year round. After Qin Pingan took his seat, he and this young Qi practitioner from Lianxiang, the Great Wall of Jianqi, asked about the progress of Fulu practice. As the only Fulu monk in the Luapa Mountain, Jiang went to the official Shanzhong Daochang, where Qin Pingan last time presented to Jiang Chu a manuscript of the original copy of the Book of Pills, Volume 1. Jiang Chu was a little guilty and bit his scalp and said, I only learned the first 3 kinds of introductory talismans on the true works, and have not yet mastered it. It can only be said that there is a scribbled talisman, which is less than the so-called painted talismans of Huanjinren in the booklet. There is still a long way to go to become a realm. When it comes to life-critical practice, Jiang Chu dared not conceal anything, not to mention the fact that there is no face or face on the side of the hermit. Qin Pingan smiled and said, everything is difficult at the beginning. There is a stack of yellow paper talisman that Jiang went to draw on the table. Qin Pingan picked up a talisman and placed it on the top. It was the most familiar light-carrying talisman with Yang Qi. He traveled far away from home and traveled repeatedly, and it was the one he used the most. One of Fulu. Qin Pingan's flicked lightly, and the talisman paper suddenly disappeared, leaving only a vermilion talisman hanging in the air, and then twisting his wrist and then gently pushing it horizontally. The talisman, which was originally only the size of a palm, suddenly became one. The big talisman of Zhang et al. Stands in the house like a god. Qin Pingan stood up and walked to the talisman. Jiang Chu immediately followed, holding a lamp talisman with a Yang Qi between the 2 sides. Qin Pingan stretched his hand to a cinnabar line. Look at this, it is obviously a bit skewed. Obviously when you painted the talisman, you were too pursuing to do it in one go. On the contrary, there was a problem in the aura scheduling which led to a lack of energy. This kind of subtle deviation appeared in chaos. The embankment of 1,000 miles was destroyed in an ant nest. The monk must not ignore it. When drawing a symbol along the way, there should be a vision and mentality of seeing mustard seeds and seeing mustard seeds. Look at this again. There are also problems with this horizontal and vertical connection. Although it does not prevent you from drawing this talisman, according to talisman terminology, this place belongs to the conflict between mountains and waters, which will damage the growth of the aura of the talisman. Once it is sacrificed, the talisman will be powerful. It is inevitable that it will be greatly reduced. If you learn the Taoism with others, it is easy to find loopholes, and it will be difficult to sustain a slight collision with the magic. Help Jianghu point out the flaws of Fulu one by one, where should be revised immediately, and where can be improved later, Qin Pingan said in great detail. Jiang went to listen carefully and remembered one by one. After that, Qin Pingan put his fingers together, and without pen, ink or paper, he drew out the same Yangqi carving lamp symbol out of thin air. When the symbol was completed, in an instant, gold the light is shining and the room is shining. Qin Pingan then condensed it into a golden talisman with a height of more than 1 foot, gently pushed it to Jiang and smiled. Look back to draw the talisman and make more comparisons. Later, when you enter the middle 5 realms as a gift, I will help you. And someone old asked for a talisman that had held a mountain away from the ground for hundreds of years. Of course, it could not be the true talisman. It was just a copy of the inscription on the inscription, and it was far from the true magic. Qin Pingan said slowly, heaven and humans teach the Dharma at the same time, and the sages of the sky follow the avenues, divide the yin and yang, determine the news, establish the universe and rule the world. Together, these talismans are in a certain way. In a sense, it is like the history books and almanacs of the mountain dynasty. It is not only the Fulu monk, but the mountaineering practice is based on the small world of the human body, and the outside world is involved. Therefore, the old Yu, who is known as the master of the world, was once in the preface of the widely circulated Book of Talisman. It is clear for us to open the sect. The head is round to the sky, the foot is to the ground, the eyes are to the sun and the moon, the limbs are 4 o'clock, the 5 internal organs are 5 elements, and the 9 orifices are 9 continents. There are many phenomena in human beings, and they are the heaven of law. Qin Pingan's number of talisman paintings on the path of cultivation, although not comparable to the number of times he practiced boxing, but compared to some of the fairy talisman monks, it's probably only a lot more. Qin Pingan shared some of his own experience without selfishness and talked to Jiang. According to the saying, the old saying goes, the mountains and rivers of the earth, the essence of the mountains and rivers are stars, and each should be in its own state, dividing the field as the country, and they are all for spiritual proof. Therefore there are 4 forms in the sky for the right spirit, and the earth has the sea to publish books. Therefore, the mountains, rivers, and the sky full of stars are the best and largest talisman in the eyes of the Fulu monks. This is the real Daoshu talisman. Wait for the destined person to get what he needs, do his own way and prove his own way. Go Jiang, think about it, the human mountain range winding for thousands of miles, is it not a fairy rune? The Big Dipper in the sky hanging for thousands of years, is it not a complete rune? If reason is empty talk, then seeing is believing. Qin Pingan suddenly said in a solemn voice, go stand where you are, concentrating and holding your breath with your heart and form. Without giving Jianghu too much opportunity to restrain his mind, Qin Pingan lightning shot and patted the opponent's shoulder lightly. Jianghu only felt the whole person drifting backwards, but was shocked to find that in front of him, except for the blue shirt of the hidden official. There is also a self-back figure motionless. Mind and body separated? Or is it the legendary Yin traveling far away from the body? Not to mention the secret methods and special cases. According to the common sense of the mountain, if a person who is a cultivator can produce a clear golden pill, he can travel far away from the orifice, and wait until the primordial infant is born. The embryonic form of the outer body of the Yangshan body is the origin of the saying that, the land immortals live in the world and live forever. Never thought that Jianghu had just stopped, and Qin Ping's lightly pushed his forehead, and then slid back a few steps again. Then Qin Pingan shook his sleeves and could no longer tell who he was. The Jianghu was like walking through the void, the world was different and the Taoist was in the middle. It turned out that under Jiangchu's feet is a vast picture of the situation in Jiuzhou, while above his head is a galaxy. Qin Pingan put his fingers together and tapped on the center of the eyebrows of Jiangchu, as if to help open the eyes of the sky. He stretched out his hand again, took the thousands of rivers above the earth like a rope, waved his hand again and grabbed the galaxy, then waved his sleeves, the stars and the rivers, a brain flooded into a certain body shape. The Jianghu of Jiangzemin seems to have suddenly become the mountains, gas palaces and long rivers of meridians in the latter's small world. After a while, Qin Pingan saw that Jiangchu's Taoism was no longer sufficient to support this vision, but Jiangchu himself was always unaware of it. He was still immersed in this heaven and earth vision. After hurting Jiang's path, Qin Pingan gently yanked his mind, soul, and body back toward his mind-blooded seed. After Jiang returned to his mind, he realized that he was sweating and his figure was shaky. Qin Pingan reached out and held his shoulders, and Jiangchu, whose face was pale, would not stagger and fall. Instructing my own monks is to follow Wu Shuangjiang's treatment of Sui Chu Gong disciples. As for the specific method of evangelism, it is obviously the same as that of Lu Jinglong. Qin Pingan asked Jiang to sit back, take a good breath and calm his mind, and smiled. In my opinion, the so-called traveling thousands of miles can actually be divided into two types. God is contemplating the small world of the human body. With this practice, both inside and outside, both large and small, with a lofty heart and down to earth, I believe that one day you can draw several unique talismans of your own. Jiang wiped off the sweat on his forehead and said with a face, I dare not think about it. I have to think about it. Qin Pingan shook his head and smiled. If a monk Fulu who doesn't want to draw a few big symbols on the mountain, what will he do in the future? Jiang Chu grinned and nodded vigorously. Qin Pingan took out a long wooden box from his sleeve, gently placed it on the table and said with a smile, There are 10 cinnabar ink ingots in the box and they are all given to you. They are engraved with something like Tianchu Wen Yao. The auspicious words of the earth are all immortal, so it is full of spirit. But don't thank me, it was Xiaomo who accompanied me to the colorful world of Feishing City this time. The monk Fulu who wandered to the summer city, opened a shop in partnership. When Xiaomo was visiting the shop, he made a special trip to buy this set of Yuanling cinnabar ink for you. Mo is a sword repairman in Feishing, and I want to take the opportunity to attach to it. Xiaomo originally intended to give it to you in my name. I don't think it's appropriate. You just accept it. You don't need to make a special trip to thank Xiaomo afterwards. The only reason for him not to be a good-for-profit boy in the future is that he can't stand those who come to thank you with the front foot and the back foot. Jiang Chu was a little embarrassed and said softly, How come Senior Xiaomo is giving expensive gifts again? Qin Pingan joked, Who makes him high and rich in his pocket so that every time he goes out, his only hobby is probably thinking about who and who needs what. I have advised him several times, but it's useless anyway. A piece of painted talisman paper and cinnabar, are generally indispensable, and can be roughly divided into two categories, cinnabar and smoked ink, gold powder and silver powder, anyway they are very expensive. Among them, cinnabar was originally the material for alchemy of the immortal family, and it was also used by secular emperors and monarchs to review memorials and circle reading. In the eyes of cultivators, De Qi is the pure sun of heaven and earth, which is enough to ward off evil and evil. Therefore, the secret cinnabar ink made by the fairy family is known as supernatural and solid. In addition, the homonym of cinnabar is punish killing, so the better the rank of cinnabar, the better the effect of cinnabar, which is used to draw symbols, will kill ghosts and drive away evil spirits. It's just that there are many producing areas of cinnabar in the world and its reserves are huge, so literary talents have the doubt that cinnabar is as cheap as soil and cannot be burned for pill. The quality of cinnabar produced in Yuanling is recognized as the first in the world. After making ink ingots, finely grind the text under the pen, known as the true text of the Red Book in the Howran world, it is often used by the monarchs and the Ministry of Rites to seal the gods of the mountains and waters. Qin Pingan got up and smiled, Go, let's find that accountant to catch the autumn wind. Mr. Accountant on the ferry, besides Wei Wenlong, the god of wealth of Luapa Mountain, there is also Zhang Jiajin, who is unable to practice cultivation. Jiang Chu and Zhang Jiajin are both hometowns and the same age. It's just that because one has already practiced mountaineering and the other has always been an ordinary master, now only looking at the appearance, the age difference between the two is at least a dozen years old. When the two of them arrived in the accounting room, Zhang Jiajin smiled and asked, My lord Jiang, are you drinking tea? Qin Pingan smiled and said, Drink a bowl of hot tea. Drinking is easy to make mistakes. Settling accounts is a delicate work, and it is not the kind of literati poems. Drinking can increase your talents. Zhang Jiajin nodded, Wait a moment, I will immediately boil water and make tea. There are tea leaves in the house. They are Yuqian tea fried by the steward Julian himself. They are all packed in tin cans. There was a stove in the corner and a sack of charcoal. Zhang Jiajin took out the fire fold and lit the thatch and firewood in the stove. It seemed that he did not drink less tea. In addition, there is a big brazier which is placed under the table, and the cold starts from the bottom of the feet. Zhang Jiajin usually steps on the edge of the brazier with his feet to keep warm. Jiang went to watch this scene with a complicated expression. If you boil the water yourself, if you are in a hurry when you are waiting for guests, then you can use the most common mountain fire talisman to make a fire. A little spiritual energy consumption can be completely ignored. For no reason, I remembered that Zhu Lian took himself as a carpenter back then. When the chief manager was playing the ink line one time, he said casually, "Knowing that there is no other way, it is as easy as fate, and virtue is also the best." This sentence is obviously meant for Jiang Chu, but the content of the words is definitely not praising Jiang Chu but something else. To be honest, if it wasn't for Zhu Lian's reminder or beating, Jiang Chu does feel that he is not the same as his fellow countrymen. Zhu Lian said, "Why can the mountain master treat Zhang Jiajin with a normal mind but you can't?" Once made Jiang Chu like falling into an ice cave for a moment, but he still has lingering fears. The reason is already clear. It's just that until today, following Master Yingguan came here, Jiang went to look at this simple account room that had never been set foot, and the peaceful fellow of the same age, as if he had understood something beyond the truth. Xiaomo also brought a gift to Zhang Jiajin. Chen Pingan put it on the table, but Zhang Jiajin declined to accept it. Chen Pingan drank tea, flipped through the account books, and by the way said something about the situation in Feixingcheng for the two of them. Of course, Zhang Jiajin and Jiang Chu did not want to miss a word about the current situation in their hometown. Closing the account book in his hand, Chen Pingan raised his head and smiled and asked, "After listening to this, will you regret coming to World with me?" Jiang Chu and Zhang Jiajin looked at each other and smiled. After that, Chen Pingan left alone. Jiang went to stay in the house, and Zhang Jiajin picking up the kettle on the table, helping the other party refill a bowl of hot tea, he whispered, "If you don't feel awkward, if you need to spend money on cultivation in the future, just mention it to me. Anyway, my salary, keeping it is keeping it, at most it is just lying on the account books and eating some interest. This little fairy money will definitely not help you much. It's just a matter of heart." Jiang Chu looked at Zhang Jiajin with sincere eyes, nodded and smiled, "What, am I polite to you?" Then Jiang went to jokingly said, "It's more difficult to lend money to someone than to borrow money from someone. You learned it from the hermit?" Zhang Jiajin smiled and said nothing. Jiang Chu hesitated but couldn't help but ask, "Zhang Jiajin, you don't have any long-term plans? In the Fallen Mountain, it seems that there is only this Mr. Accountant, neither a monk nor a pure martial artist." Hearing what Jiang Chu meant, Zhang Jiajin nodded and smiled, "Yes, I have talked with Mr. Zhu a long time ago to see if I have a chance and become a mountain in the future." When Jiang heard about this, he was surprised. He thought about it and said slowly, "Zhang Jiajin, you don't know clearly. It is not easy for an ordinary master to become of mountains and rivers. It's just a ghost and a heroic spirit. If it's a stranger like you, it's not necessarily the pain that is piercing and soul-stirring, let alone a trainer or a pure martial artist with tough physique, it may not be able to bear it. If you fail, you will end up dispelled. It is said that you will not even have the afterlife." Zhang Jiajin poured herself a bowl of tea. "You forgot the kind of ointment from the Yang family drugstore in the small town? Although it is now strictly controlled by the Dali court, the relationship between the hermit and our Luopishan and them can help. It's not difficult for me to ask for a copy. The greatest miracle of that kind of ointment is that in addition to eliminating pain, it can also keep people wise." Zhang Jiajin continued, "Mr. Zhu said frankly that this is just the first step to become a mountain god. In fact, there are still 2 ghost gates to go after, but even if I can't pass the 3 levels and become a mountain god, there is still a way to go back and forth. If it's a big deal, I'll take the 2nd place and stay on the side of Luopa Mountain as a ghost. It's more difficult to discuss with the Dali court for the official edict. It can only be equivalent to building an obscene shrine for me, so even if you have a temple and a golden body, it is not a pure golden body. In the future, it will be greatly restrained if you bear the incense of the world, but this is only the worst plan, you don't need to worry too much." Jiang Chu was silent. To put it simply, the ordinary achievement of a golden body and the promotion from a living person to a is tantamount to climbing into the sky in one step. The threshold is so high and the difficulty is so great that it is unimaginable. Zhang Jiajin smiled and said, "The hermit must have known about this for a long time, but he hasn't talked about it with me. Jiang, tell me, what does this mean?" Suddenly Jiang Chu, it must be the hidden officer who felt confident. Jiang Chu was relieved immediately and said, "Good, you Zhang Jiajin, you are a lot smarter." Zhang Jiajin pointed to the account book over the desk. Can a fool be the accountant? Qin Pingan found Xiao Mo on the side of Xiaomi Li's house. It happened that both Chai Wu and King Sun Chun were there. Chai Wu would come here for a drink as long as he was practicing. Now, in the room of the right guardian of Luapa Mountain, there is a cabinet made by Mi Jianxian with the help of himself, filled with an altar of wine, all prepared for Chai Wu. Xiao Mo is teaching Taoism and swordsmanship to the two little girls. Anyway, both qualifications are good, so it is easy to draw inferences from one another. Qin Pingan sat on a bench with Xiaomi Li and ate sunflower seeds. Xiao Mo was worried that his own way of cultivation might be different from today's Taoist secrets in words and meanings. In order to avoid misleading children, Xiao Mo specially taught two young girls an ancient language that has long been lost. At this moment, Xiao Mo is teaching an ancient technique that preserves God's contemplation, which is indeed quite different from today's Taoist formulas. For example, Xiao Mo points to his neck at this moment, and calls his throat the top 10 of the heart of the palace. In the second floor, in addition, the 5 internal organs have their own functions, and each has its own tempering method. Xiao Mo let the two little girls run a ray of spiritual energy, not similar to the breath of the air trainer, but a bit like a pure innocence of a martial artist from top to bottom, and at the same time in the different realms of the human body, let them separately think of the different gods who performed their duties in the ancient times, such as hunting the world from the sky. 3 lights went up and down for candles, falling and falling brightly. From high to bottom, there are gods flying between the sun and the moon. Hold the yellow back to the purple and to the dantian, and the dragon flag toss the fire bell across the sky. The thunder and electric excites the gods, and the immortal land of longevity is dying. This kind of ancient practice can only be taught by Xiao Mo. The key is that the two little girls, every time they visualize different gods, there is really a good atmosphere that rises with it, corresponding to it. Qin Pingan admitted that at their age they hadn't practiced for months and months, and would never want to have such a movement as Chai Wu and King Sun Chun. Xiaomi Li reached out his hand to block his mouth and said in a low voice with the good man Shanju, "I don't understand a word, what should I do?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "It's an ancient language, so it's normal to not understand it." In fact, this time in Feixingcheng, Qin Pingan also brought a few manuscripts of the sword book from Wenjianla. King Sun Chun is a local swordsman of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and the little girl is an anonymous disciple of Ning Yao. This is not counted. Violation. Wait until they enter a situation similar to movement and tranquility are real people. Xiao Mo looked at his son. Qin Pingan nodded and could leave. Walking out of the house with the millet grains, Qin Pingan came to the bow, moving slightly in his mind. After a while there was a roaring wind and thunder in the sea of clouds in the distance, but when the uninvited guest approached the Fengyuan ferry, it instantly became silent. It was the long sword that was left by Qin Pingan in Shindu Mountain. Night tour. Qin Pingan touched the head of the millet grains and smiled, "I'll be back soon." Millet nodded obediently. Qin Pingan's figure turned into a dozen sword lights, and he flew hundreds of miles away from the wind and kite ferry. After he recondensed into a green shirt, he went south with his sword and went straight to a place in the middle of Tonggishao. Xiao Mo followed. In the scorching sun, on a xianxia ferry, several immortal masters are overlooking the world. An arc of sword light, engulfed by the sound of wind and thunder, crashed by hundreds of meters away. This makes the xianxia ferry boat like a boat in the water, bumping into waves and ups and downs for a while. When I turned my head and looked around, I saw a bright sword light, a touch of cyan figure long gone. The land of Jianghu under the mountain dynasty was under the majestic rain, and the day was as dark as night. In an instant, the dark clouds were torn apart by the sharp sword light, as if the sky was open, the sun was shining on the world. A raging river flowing from east to west, with a flash of cyan figure, a ravine suddenly appeared on the surface of the river below his feet, and the exposed riverbed was faintly visible. A fairy family mansion with a majestic mountain peak, a few sharp-eyed trainers, found a light out of thin air in the extreme distance, and pierced people's eyes in the blink of an eye, and rammed straight toward Zhu Mountain. The next moment, the sword light suddenly dispersed in all directions, just round the top of the mountain, and recondensed into a sword light at a very far distance, leaving only the sound of thunder resounding through the world. In the end, the sword light stopped in one place and appeared with the sword behind him. 9 Xiongjian towers were used by the Confucian temple to suppress the transportation of mountains, waters and air on a continent. This Tonggishao is called Jinyalu, and it is actually a sycamore tree. It is rumored that this tree was once so close to the sky that it could not be higher than this tree whenever a certain round of bright moon rose. The last time the guests came here were when Hai Zhoumi, Fei Ran and Credit You. However, Firen and Shiyue were both temporarily detained by Zhoumi. I was fortunate enough to witness the part of the truth of a town demon building, a long-year-old sycamore tree, which did not show its real body at the time, but the avenue turned into a majestic city, occupying an area of thousands of miles. It's just that Zhoumi just stretched out his hand and tried to break the prohibition on mountains and rivers, but did not choose to enter it. Zhoumi once said some shocking inside stories for Xiegu, such as the master of the Lotus Nunnery is mortal, but it was a bit earlier than Zhoumi expected. The credit month is the predecessor of the bright moon, so in the wild world she is more legitimate than the master of the Lotus Nunnery who occupied and refined a round of the bright moon, but the credit month is still not one of the 12 high positions in the ancient heaven. Lord, I can only say that there is a chance and the opportunity is the greatest. Therefore Xuanhuan, a direct disciple of the great ancestor of Tuiyue Mountain, would often go to Mingiwezhong to chat with the moon, because the real body of the new makeup was once a moon palace watering water goddess. In ancient times, there were many bright moons as if it were described as a 6-part yamen. The moon was a high-ranking official. Once the real body was restored, he would be the servant. If it were not for the moon to be thrown to Beipingzu, Zhoumi would have taken it. She ascended to the sky and left together, occupying a place in the new heaven, raising the gods, which is equal to the number of consecutive jumps of official promotion, and directly promoted to the new Mingyue co-lord. Chen Ping'an took a deep breath and squinted to see the layers of colorful glaze, like water rippling. This is a natural victory over oneself by this place. To be precise, it is the real name of the big demon carried on the body. There is a natural aversion and suppression here. Chen Ping'an bowed his head, his stature rickets. Not surprisingly, the other party didn't want to see him. If he couldn't open the door, he would have to shut the door. Just breaking into this kind of thing, how proper it is. So there was Xiao Mo with a yellow hat and blue shoes appearing beside him, shaking his sleeves, and then 2 more long swords in his hands. He raised his head and smiled. Just entertain old friends like this? Then don't blame me for not remembering old feelings. Sword of Coming Chapter 922. The chapter was uploaded late, sorry. When Xiao Mo was about to release his sword, a faint sound rang from the sky and the earth, like a rusty leaf falling, with a strong sense of loneliness. It's really you. Xiao Mo waited for the following, and after a while the voice sounded again. You all go back and the meeting will not help. Xiao Mo sneered, and no longer talked nonsense with the fellow Taoist who had only met a few times. He walked slowly forward and held the long sword in his hand. To the other person's true body. Xiao Mo first nailed a long sword into the ground, and the entire lonely world was empty, and then changed its color just like a picture scroll. Because of the age it appeared yellowish. Chen Ping'an knew that the purpose of Xiao Mo's sword was to serve as a temporary insurgency in the long river of time. No matter how magical the Taoist friend is, how tricky he is, Xiao Mo can always use his mind to find this one he made. Time ferry crossing and then hand the sword again. Only need to pull 2 places in one line, and it will not be completely lost. After Xiao Mo took a dozen steps, he waved a sword casually again. This was after the battle of Mingyue Haotsai. Chen Ping'an saw Xiao Mo use his sword again. The sword light is not a straight line, but like a gossamer that drifts in the wind, spreading out for thousands of miles. Xiao Mo kept his sword out, or leaned or slanted it up and down, downplaying it, but the sword energy rhyme contained in Jingguang became more and more majestic every time. This is the hands-on sword of an ascendant pinnacle sword repairman. The rules of Xiaoxiandi here are indeed a bit weird. Xiao Mo's sword light is not scattered, but in Chen Ping'an's vision, he has lost the traces of the sword light, like being folded and bent, as if it has been following a quiet fork. Go far away. Xiao Mo said heartily, My son, these fork roads are similar to the roots and leaf veins of a Chinese phoenix tree. But I can rest assured that the number of roads and the size of Xiaoxiandi's territory have an upper limit. Xiaoxiandi is even stranger than this. Xiaoma also, it's not that I haven't experienced it personally. Chen Ping'an nodded, not in a hurry. That voice rang in the ears of the two again. Since it is the reunion of old friends, why bother to meet each other? Xiao Mo sneered with a sword in his hand and said, I want to see, this small world of fellow Taoists can withstand hundreds of thousands of swords. As long as you keep handing the sword energy and sword intent continue to accumulate, and the sword light can naturally burst out like a cone. At that time, all condensed into a sword, it is a real questioning sword. It is recognized that the spirit of the world is not easy to practice, not easy to regain consciousness, and slow to practice. The only advantage of this type of mountain Taoist is that if there are no natural and man-made disasters, the lifespan is extremely long, especially the vegetation and the like. Once it is in the upper 5 realms, the Taoist age is especially older, but it really depends on the qualifications of cultivation. It really is not. Xiaomo has a big self-esteem. Compared with his own swordsmanship, it is a world of difference. Even if I sleep for 10,000 years, I will give you 10,000 years of age out of thin air, so what? If you are polite with me, I will be more polite than you. You are not polite with me, better, I will ask the sword as a thank you. The old coachman in the capital, the ghost fairy Eugene, are all considered polite people. When he arrived in Howran, he had been going to the countryside to do what he had done, so he stretched out his hand and didn't hit the smiley person, which made Xiaomo really hold back for a long time. After Xiaomo handed out more than 100 swords, he was able to pull one of the sword lights with his heart, like a spirit snake tumbling, swaying violently on one of the roads, the sword lights splashing and exploding, like a slender galaxy instantly collapsed. The voice was silent for a moment, only to remind aloud, Qin Pinyin, you'd better advise this fellow Taoist not to act like this. If the vitality of this place is hurt by the sword light, it will only affect the luck of the whole Tonggishao. It's hard to get back to the original state. Qin Pingan said indifferently, the two evils are the lesser of power. It's better than having a closed door. I didn't even see the predecessor, so I went back home in a desperate manner. The crux of the problem today is not how I and Xiaoma acted. It's just whether you're willing to open the door to meet guests. You and I know that your so-called recovery is just superficial, but there are actually many hidden dangers. The descendants of Tonggishao will have to pay off their debts one by one for today's people. You follow the way of heaven, so naturally it doesn't matter. The many sequelae of the collapse of ritual and music in the past years do not affect your own practice. As long as the overall number of a certain one remains the same, the predecessor will still be considered as a consummation of merit, and be credited to a continent of heaven and earth. Just wait for 300 to 500 years, just wait for the Confucian temple, the monks and the various dynasties under the mountains, and of course I refill the landscapes of various places, and you will have survived this great catastrophe safely, and you will be able to return to consummation realm. But I am using the humane method to make up for the lack of land on a continent. The more you postpone it, the more troublesome it becomes. Your covenant with the Temple of Confucius has ended. Consummation, invisibly replaced and filled the vacancy left by the old master of the East China Sea, and became a kind of illusory master of a continent. Let alone see you again, it will be a difficult task to find you at that time. The voice didn't deny the matter. Yes. I will retreat soon and make some deductions to find the way to the 14th level for myself. Obviously, Qin Pingan was right. However, it was the first time Xiaomo heard about this and he suddenly stopped beating. He only felt that the so-called Taoist was just slapped himself in the face. So in an instant, dozens of swords were handed out, the sword light was like a rainbow, and the whole yellowed world suddenly became white. Qin Pingan walked slowly behind Xiaomo, stopped, raised his foot and stepped on the ground, lowered his head and smiled. The seniors are highly respected, and they were able to become ally with Li Sheng in the early years and built a town demon building for the Confucian temple. The secret file of the Confucian temple knows that the seniors have a gentle temperament and have no conflict with the world. This is also the root of the younger generation's willingness to talk to the seniors, but now that I will be completely free again soon, the seniors can't be sure what I must do. It's not just something sitting on the sidelines but crossing the river to tear down the bridge, so embarrassing a junior who is less than a year old. The mud bodhisattva still has 3 points of anger, let alone a junior? Qin Pingan smiled and said, it really doesn't work. I will ask Li Sheng to move half of the Great Wall of Sword Qi here. I want to see if the seniors will want to be in the 14th realm at that time, can they see me, and if there is any chance to ask me whether to agree or not. I think it's difficult. The voice was a little annoyed and hurriedly said, the Temple of Confucius promised me that the catastrophe is over, and that covenant is destroyed on its own. Even the sages who are sitting here must not hinder my practice. If this young man wants to act like this, it's okay if he can't find the 14th realm in a closed-door retreat. If he finds that avenue, it's like being blocked by a wall. And once you get into such an embarrassing situation, then you and this young sword repairer will have a veritable battle between the two sides. As long as one of them wants to be in the 14th realm, they need to live endlessly with the other side. Are you Qin Pingan still a close disciple of Wensheng's line, or a Confucian disciple? Qin Pingan shook his head and said, since I can't replace the Confucian temple, of course the Confucian temple can't replace me. To stop me from mending a continent and land missing is to ask me about the sword. It's not a joke, please take it seriously. The voice suddenly frustrated and said, the most holy master has been here before, personally wish me a smooth journey in my practice. Qin Pingan said blankly, then in this matter, I'm afraid I will disappoint the holy master. Hearing this, the other party was obviously shocked beyond words, and was speechless for a while. When Sheng did not dare to say such things, a madman who dared to disobey the most holy master. Shit scholars, gentle sweeping, you swordsmen, your stinky temper that won't change for thousands of years. Xiaomo smiled heartily. There was a long silence, probably trying to stabilize Dao's heart. The voice spoke again, finally showing a weak tone. I can trust the Saint of Rights, but I can't trust you. Xiaomo squinted his eyes and said in a deep voice, I have turned over the almanac. Today I am not allowed to move the ground, enter the funeral, make a stove, plant and bury. It is advisable to go out, harvest, use beams, build houses and make alliances. Qin Pingan stepped forward, patted Xiaomo's arm, motioned not to rush to pass the sword, and stood side by side with Xiaomo, smiling with both hands. I also know the situation of seniors. For the predecessors, all the creatures that rise up are not just the palms of the palms and the backs of the hands are simply fleshy. The voice continued, to be precise, I'm a sword repairman who doesn't believe that he can act only by his liking. After a while, I added another sentence. I even want to believe that the outlander who walked into the Flying Eagle fort back then can't believe in a last hermit from the Great Wall of Sword Chi. Qin Pingan smiled and said, if seniors had treated people with sincerity earlier, they wouldn't have broken up with an old friend of 10,000 years. Qin Pingan. Your murderous intention at this moment is more serious than this, Xiaomo. The younger generation will accept it. In front of Qin Pingan and Xiaomo, a passage similar to a post road appeared. The two sides were as dark as night, similar to the two ends of the Great Wall of Sword Chi in the past, connecting with a certain Taishu realm. Qin Pingan glanced back and the white fog was vast and he had lost the way he came. Xiaomo frowned, Qin Pingan smiled and said, if you come you will be at ease. It is a short trip. Qin Pingan took out a golden white jet from the sleeve, from the authentic alchemy book, presented by Li Shixing, nicknamed Moon Talisman. This talisman is relatively late in the book. This talisman hovered on the side of the shoulder. At the same time in Qin Pingan Xianhu Heaven and Earth, there appeared a sundial for precise timekeeping. Sure enough, there was a huge difference in the speed of time passing between the inside and outside of the world. Glancing at the burning speed of the white horse's passing talisman, Qin Pingan knew about it. In this world it may have been a year before the outside world Tong Yezhou had only one day passed. Qin Pingan reminded, no matter how gracious the seniors are, according to the timing of the outside world at most 10 hours later, I must see the real body of seniors and negotiate a deal. Two donkeys appeared out of thin air on the side of the road, probably as a means of transportation. Qin Pingan laughed dumbly, but not worried about any calculations and directly turned over and rode on the donkey. Qingpao carried the sword on his back, tied a red wine gourd around his waist, gently clamped the belly of the donkey, his hooves began to sway forward. Xiaomo shook his wrists and a long sword was scattered into the light of his sleeves. Xiaomo is still dressed in yellow hat and blue shoes, holding a green bamboo stick and sitting on the back of the donkey. There are only black and white in the world and Xiaomo looks around like a scribbled freehand brushwork. Xiaomo asked, my son, the rest of the sword lights? Qin Pingan complained, there is no reason to take back the gift you gave out. Xiaomo nodded lightly, regretful in his heart. He had already handed out 200 or 300 more swords. At this moment the picture scroll is a dusk scene. The two of them rode on donkeys and soon came to a hillside that appeared suddenly, came to the top of the mountain and looked far away. Seeing the narrow road, there is a simple building similar to a post house on the side of the road. The team is mighty, spreading on the mountain roads, no fewer than thousands of people. Even among them are the emperor's chariots. Look at the arrogant look of the civil and military officials. Is it to take refuge from Beijing? Qin Pingan took off the sword gourd and drank a sip of wine. His eyes were like a picture of Beijing's 100 divisions rushing. There was only one person in the picture, like painted paintings. The middle-aged man had a long bamboo tube around his waist. The of the right index finger, with a slight calluses on the belly, left the crowded road alone, chewing cakes, and walking along a stream to the depths of the mountains. Qin Pingan discovered an interesting thing. If the previous Xiao Xiandi was an ink painting, then when he saw this man he focused on that man or what he saw in the eyes of the man, it would gradually change into a fine brushwork. The details are clear, a flower and a tree, a stream of fish swimming, all come alive with vitality, and eventually become a vivid green landscape painting, no different from the truth of the world. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Let's keep up with this little god." In the twilight, the man found a village house by the creek with low thatched eaves. There was only an old woman and a woman, sitting opposite each other, weaving chicken coops. The old woman asked the man to eat some food. In order to avoid suspicion, the man slept under the eaves at night, tossing and turning, unable to sleep at night, so he simply took advantage of the moonlight to draw out a chess book from his arms, got up and sat down, flipped through it for a while. He began to close his eyes and concentrate, twisting his hands like chess pieces, one after another as if they were playing music. Qin Pingan took the opportunity to glance at the cover of the chess book in the distance under the tree in the distance of the hut. It was actually a well-documented and well-known chess book. In Howren's history he was quite famous. It was just under the mountain and played against both sides. 5 rounds has the reputation of stop watching 5 rounds while sick. Qin Pingan was riding on the back of the donkey and glanced at the white horse talisman next to his shoulder, and the speed of the passage of time did not change. In fact, even if there is a monk's imperial wind, overlooking the entire world at the moment, it seems that there is only this scene. It is about that the senior reminded himself that there will be a scene of the next one after the past, and when all the relevant passes have passed, both sides to meet? What is the picture? Are you thinking of delaying time so that you can ask the Confucian temple for help? Otherwise, it doesn't make much sense to invite someone to come here to help out and stop myself and Xiaomo asked, "Master, do you need me to take a sword to find out?" Qin Pingan shook his head and smiled, "Be patient and watch the changes." Xiaomo asked, "Is that person's identity a chess player?" Qin Pingan nodded and said, "Seeing that the chess is not weak. The man under the thatched roof doesn't seem to be playing music at this moment, but is playing against himself. To say how high his chess power is, it seems that he can't go anywhere. Qin Pingan is quite familiar with the rules of Go's game in the world, and he can memorize it by rote. What's more, there are 4 people who were born in the lotus flower-blessed land. Apart from Wei Haiyang, the other 3 are Zhu Lian, Lu Baixiang and Lu Baixiang. Sui right, even if he rests in the awe-inspiring world, he is considered a master. And on the Luapa mountain there are Zheng Dafeng and Shanjun Weibo, both of whom are good at this. Moreover, in the summer palace back then, there were also masters such as Yun Lin Junbai and Scrofulariaci Chao Dagon, all of whom were first class. National champion. Now, with Qin Pingan's Go skills, playing the first 30 or 50 moves with others, pretending to be a master, it's still no problem. Therefore, when teaching people to play chess in the summer palace, the hermit likes to call himself half a stinky chess basket. There were no lights in the room, and the old woman and the woman who lived in each room started to play chess. There were no chess pieces on the board. Both parties just dictated the position of the player. There were so many long tests that at dawn the sky was white and the 2 players played. Less than 40 hands. The man had long taken out the chess pieces and chess papers from the long bamboo tube and laid them out on the ground. While listening to the chess game in the room, he placed the chess pieces on the paper chessboard. When the old woman said that he had won the 9 pieces, the woman gave up. The man became brave and knocked gently. After a while, the old woman and the woman walked out of the house. The man asked for advice and the old woman went to make a fire and cook, but let the daughter-in-law who had no more greed to teach him chess skills. Jingchai cloth the woman in the skirt only taught for less than half an hour, and said that it was enough to make him invincible in the world. Having said this, the woman raised her head and looked under the tree outside the hut. She stroked her temples and hair intentionally or unconsciously. Qin Pingan turned a blind eye to this and the woman got up and went busy. The man left and looked back along the stream. She had lost the hut and the man was confused. In an instant, Qin Pingan and Xiaomo seemed to be returning back along a long river of time, riding a donkey again on the hillside, and once again saw the man with a bamboo tube at his waist, walking along the stream. Xiaomo asked with a smile, "Does the son need to play chess to beat them to pass?" Qin Pingan nodded and said, "It should be. When you continue to stare at the chess waiting edict, I will go to the post road to see if I can pick up the omissions, and come to meet you again at dawn." After that, Xiaomo continued to follow the man on a donkey, while Qin Pingan went to the road at the foot of the mountain, looking for an old official who looked like the person in the painting, wearing a purple robe and a goldfish bag. Qin Pingan casually found a conversation, and chatted with the old man. In the end he said that he was willing to pay a high price to buy books, but the old man declined, saying that it was those boxes of books that had been kept for a long time and it was not easy to make money. Without saying a word, Qin Pingan knocked over the book boxes on the carriage to the ground, and then stretched out his hand. There was a breeze. After all, the books were spread out except for the cover, they were all blank. As for those characters, carriages and horses, it seemed that they had fallen into a static state. Qin Pingan stood there, shaking his head and smiling. The mountains and rivers are barren, and the predecessor's collection of books is still a little short, so that it is impossible to do it. After that, Qin Pingan had no interest in exploring. This kind of fake little world is too thin, with bones and no flesh and blood. How can we talk about a deeper level of energy? Ride on the donkey on the side of the road again to find Xiaomo and the hut. I just didn't forget to wave his hand again, put those books back into the box, reverse the picture and return to the carriage one by one. At dawn again this day, Qin Pingan did not wait to see the woman raise her head and look at him again, and he led Xiaomo on the donkey. He waited for the old woman to say the invincible words and smiled, not necessarily. Arrived at the boardwalk under the eaves and smiled with the chess waiter, borrow chess pieces and chess paper with your husband. After that, Qin Pingan played a game of colorful cloud scores played by his senior brother Cui Yang and Zheng Juzhong, but today Qin Pingan, of course, pretended to play chess with Zheng Juzhong and invited the opponent to continue the game. The woman was dumbfounded, and the old woman also muttered to herself, "Is the chess of future generations already so high?" Qin Pingan looked at the chess game with sleeves in both hands and said seemingly casually, "If you want to come to the world, you always go to a higher place." The old woman nodded and smiled, and the woman also raised her hand to stroke her sideburns, smiling at the green shirt guest who had no hasta. As soon as Qin Pingan said this, the scene of the world disappeared, leaving only one ancient chess book in the corridor and inside the house. Qin Pingan glanced at it and put the two chess books in his sleeve and laughed. Xiaomo turned his head and glanced at him. That fellow Taoist, why didn't he even take the donkey away? Qin Pingan patted Xiaomo on the shoulder and praised, "No wonder we can be worshipped by Leopashen." After that, the two of them walked on foot because there was a wider official road at their feet, with rice fields on both sides, which looked like autumn harvest time. Suddenly, a rider passed by behind him, and when he went to the distance, Xiaomo looked into the distance, and soon there was an additional hostel. Before that ride, the young man in short brown clothes was riding a green horse, and he looked like a poor scholar. However, Qin Pingan took a few more glances, only to find that this man was prosperous in his official career. Human weather, in short, is a noble man who deserves to be the prime minister in his fate. When Qin Pingan and Xiaomo walked into the roadside hostel in a hurry, they found the young man sleeping soundly with his head resting on a celadon, and a smiling old Taoist priest sitting beside him, sitting on the steps. Leaning against a large package. If you are used to reading Zhiguai novels, and you encounter such a worldly expert, then you should consult the longevity technique. The host seemed to be steaming the rice, and when it was about to be cooked, a scent wafted out of the stove room. Qin Pingan folded his fists and smiled and asked, "Dare to ask the old god, where does this official road lead?" The old Taoist replied with a smile, "Handan." Qin Pingan asked, "Really not going to Daoxin Mountain, a certain liquor store that sells Huangliang liquor?" The old Taoist sighed and began to seriously look at the well-informed young man, shook his head and smiled. "The son is asking for a terrible question." Qin Pingan glanced at the bag. The old Taoist knowingly patted the bag he was carrying with him and smiled. "There is nothing else, just a bunch of depressed bags full of complaints, so I won't open it for the son, lest there be a miasma." The veteran Taoist glanced at the young scholar who was still sleeping on celadon. After taking his gaze back, he glanced at the road outside and exclaimed, "There is nothing else to ask for, just for the meaning of the Taiji book. There is no other person. It is Handan Road. Left person." Qin Pingan smiled and got up immediately, took 2 steps back and said, "Junior Qin Pingan, pay homage to Lu Zhu." The old Taoist priest named Lu Zhu by Qin Pinganzun waved his hand, motioned to sit down and talked and asked, "Zhong to Shenzhou Liang Shuang, Mr. Jaluza Fire Dragon, Taoist son, the mysterious capital of the Qingming world, have they ever broken territory?" Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "Never broke the border." The old Taoist sighed and looked up at the sky. "The spirit is too weak and the way is beyond the sky. The 5 elements are so angry that the sun and the moon are square inches." Qin Pingan sat cross-legged and smiled and said, "The wine flows into the big river and people climb the yellow crane tower. The Taoism is brilliant and the past and the present are different." The old Taoist shook his head in surprise and smiled, "Pour a piece of cake and relieve one's sorrow." Qin Pingan curiously asked, "Does the old generation have a relationship with the Huangliang kingdom of Aquarius Island?" The old Taoist nodded and said, poor Daos native place is right there. It's just that I left home and wandered very early. On the contrary, I spent more years in the Qingming world than my hometown. The old Taoist immediately smiled and played with a taste. If the poor Dao in the early years was mixed with the sword of the cicada, the man surnamed Chen might not be able to retreat. Qin Pingan does not comment on this. In fact, this is a kind of said one offends two at a loss. Qin Pingan asked again, has the senior ever met an old tree spirit? The old Taoist thought for a while, nodded and said, by chance I have pointed it to some practice. Before Qin Pingan was involved in the discussion of the Zhongtu Confucian temple, he wandered through more than 30 houses in the Yuanyang Zaborozhai. Li Huai, who was with him, only picked one favorite object, which was a bonsai, a fist-sized stone and a seal carving. The word mountain immortal can of course also be regarded as xianxia. There is a pocket-sized old willow tree entrenched at the root of the mountain. Under the tree stands an old tree elder looking at the sea. He looks like an old man, only 3 inches tall, old and temperamental. Even bigger, claiming to be the old heavenly sovereign from the south of the city, there seems to be a ban on the immortal family suppressing the realm. When the old man saw a customer, whenever he had the intention of buying, he began to curse with his arms on his hips, spitting and persuading them to rise in the daytime. Later, I heard Li Huai say that this old tree spirit said that he had seen a sword immortal with the Taoist name, Pure Yang, in the early years. One after another broke the border. This kind of speech can be heard halfway through. Sure enough, the old tree exactly has a relationship with the Taoist name, Pure Yang Luzu. Qin Pingan asked again, old seniors and that burden? The old Taoist laughed and said, good vision, poor Dao and the ancestor of the Burdenzhai can be regarded as old friends. The scholar woke up in a daze and just had a dream of enjoying the glory and prosperity of the world. At this moment he looked around blankly and saw that the old Taoist priest was still sitting beside him, and the lodge owner was still unfamiliar, but it was more than just before. A man in a green shirt and an entourage. The scholar was stunned for a long time, and finally sighed and worshipped the old Taoist priest. After thanking him, he said that he knew the truth of life, honor and disgrace, love between men and women, life and death. When the scholar was about to leave, Qin Pingan quietly waved his sleeves and the clouds rose. Suddenly, on the open space in front of the hostel, there was an old locust tree with dense branches and leaves, and several acres of clear shade. The scholar was dizzy as if he was still in his dream, and when he looked around he no longer saw the old Taoist priests and the green-shirt guest. He saw a green oil trolley driving out of the hole of the big locust tree and driving 4 tall horses. There is a purple-clothed messenger, holding a jade what, kneeling down to the scholar, claiming to be from a neighboring country. His Majesty admires talent. The scholar is agitated, but there is still a little bit of uncertainty. The figure drew up the curtain with a slender jade hand. The girl's country was beautiful, and she and the scholar had an affectionate eyebrows. The scholar suddenly flickered, and when he was indecisive, the beauty looked resentful and bit her lip. The purple waiter fell on the ground and spoke earnestly. The scholar finally moved forward and boarded the car. Suddenly, all the green oil trolley, the purple-clothed waiter, the national beauty and the big locust tree all turned into smoke and dispersed. The scholar fell to the ground, rubbing his butt, aching. It was finally decided that it was not a dream now. The old Taoist suddenly laughed with his palm. Wonderful. At the same time, Qin Pingan and Xiaomo also replaced a landscape painting, but in Qin Pingan's heart lake, there was a ripple in the heart of the old Taoist priest, saying that a certain place in Huangliang country left a sword art. Qin Pingan and Xiaomo came to a place where the heat was rising. There was a drought. There was no rain for 3 months, the rivers and lakes were dry, the grains were not harvested, and the land, thousands of miles away, was full of vegetation. Qin Pingan performed a water technique to lower the rain, but after offering the magic technique, he would return to the original place, and if he wanted to protect himself from the wind, he would just go back in time. During the drought season there was no harvest and the people's logistics moved. Along the way the bones were full of bones, and the eyes were full of terrible human tragedies. Before encountering a group of women, children who were about to fall dead on the way, Qin Pingan squatted down and gave them drinks and food. It only slides through the throat and intestines and falls straight to the ground. Qin Pingan was squatting on the spot and did not get up for a long time. Xiao Mo comforted, "My son, they are all fake." Qin Pingan nodded and shook his head. It used to be true. After getting up and rushing on the road again, Xiao Mo glanced at the son's face and it was no different. Later I encountered a county town. Someone in the city opened warehouses for disaster relief. It had been many days since they had set up a porridge shop. However, a group of gangsters who heard the news rushed past. By the time Qin Pingan entered the city, he was already like a purgatory on earth. Inside the family portal where all the houses were dead, there was a young man who fell in a pool of blood, with tears on his face, and turned his head hard to look at an old man who was hacked to death. The young man and his father repeatedly said that since ancient times disaster relief needs military guards. Why don't you listen? Why don't you listen? Qin Pingan sat on the courtyard steps covered with blood and corpses, stood up and came to the young scholar trying to hold his hand gently, but it was an afterimage, but Qin Pingan's hand still hovered in place. Whispered softly, "Don't be afraid. For you good people, walking through this world is already walking through hell." After that, I walked out of the county town, and Xiaomo came to a dry river on the outskirts of a state town. Officials with chapped lips were praying for rain, but the folk custom of the Dragon King was doing in the city. Qin Pingan squatted on the other side of the river, reached out and grabbed a handful of broken soil. He listened to the official's hoarse voice praying for rain. After reading it, he started from the beginning. After Qin Pingan got up, he shrank and walked to the other bank of the river, standing on the other side of the river. Next to the incense case, he took out the pen and paper, and helped rewrite a prayer for rain. After handing it to the yellow-faced official, the latter, with the mentality of a dead horse as a living horse doctor, was about to recite the prayer for rain, which was incompatible with the etiquette system. Just after reading the beginning, the official looked hurriedly, turning his head and looking at the man in the green shirt, as if asking with his eyes, "Is it really okay? Will it really not cause more disasters?" Because the content of praying for rain on that piece of paper is too disrespectful. Generally speaking, this kind of rain prayer books have a standard similar to the officialdom, mixed with some respectful language similar to sincere and fearful. Start with, "I want to write to the rain teacher," and then write some spring rain as an imperial edict, xiaoyuru, the book of forgiveness. And the letter of prayer for rain in his hand begins with, "Feng Bo Yu, electric mother Lei Jun, listen to my edict, and those who violate it will be cut." So when the official endorsed the book, his voice trembled, that is, it has been too long since he had a drink. Otherwise he would have been sweating. When he finished reading that rebellious prayer for rain, the official felt relieved and suddenly fell to the ground. After a while, the clouds were thick, the thunder was rolling, the lightning was thundering, and in an instant there was heavy rain, and the land of thousands of miles was full of nectar. Xiaomo raised his head and whispered, "The sun before in the county seat," he almost handed the sword without holding it back. If he hacked it to death, he couldn't get used to it because he has been deliberately disgusting son. Qin Pingan reached out and followed the raindrops the size of soybeans. "In fact, it has nothing to do with your fellow Taoist." Xiaomo smiled and said, "To be honest, if Xiaomo sees this kind of scenes before 10,000 years ago, he will only feel relieved. It's indifferent. It's different now. Maybe it's been a long time with the sun, and the ears and eyes have become so soft. Son, is this the difference between a cultivator and a cultivator?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "It's not all good to become a Taoist from ancient times to a Taoist priest. Just talking about the speed of practice will definitely slow down." After that, Qin Pingan and Xiaomo came to a new place, a land of a county. It turned out that there was a river in the county, and it has been flooded since ancient times. Qin Pingan found that he was transformed into a prefect of a county's parents. Not yet married. Because he roughly knew the way of the god, Qin Pingan had no idea of using spells and began to befriend the rich in counties and counties. As for how to manage the water, Qin Pingan had a clear plan. After all, in addition to Zhu Lian's construction method, there are also many books by the Nanyuan National Engineering Department. They have been carefully read, and they are more than enough to be a waterman for the court. Qin Pingan has taken Xiaoma and a group of subordinates to inspect the city. After the geography of the riverbed outside, it was found that only a fish-mouth diversion was needed. Bamboo cages were needed to hold the rocks and the water was tired and blocked. Afterwards, flat flutes and spillways were opened. Qin Pingan just copied and used the doorway knowledge detailed in ancient books. Later, I walked through the door to ask for money with local wealthy people. I also saw some high-level anecdotes and various trends in the market. One of them once patted the table in person and said, "We who study sages and sage books are all doing kung fu on the tsunami." At the end of the year, the wealthy man was only willing to give out 50 taels of silver. At the beginning of the year, he ran a piglet from his pig pen to his neighbor. He felt unlucky, so he sold it to the neighbor at the market price. Jean's big pig ran to the house again. As a result, the rich man still had to pay according to the market price at the beginning of the year, so he fought a lawsuit and brought trouble to the county office. Qin Pingan, the county guard, so I looked for a chance to take this matter, ask the teacher and make a big fuss. That's why the master Mao Kai, who was doing kung fu on Gangchang, went to the door overnight and took an extra 100 taels of silver. The biggest gateway in the county city was still retired from the Ministry of Rights of the capital. He had no children at his knees and only had a daughter. He claimed to be his daughter, many of his writings, history, Qingma and provincial master examination papers. If it were a son, dozens of champions in Jinshi would have been hit early. When Qin Pingan took the initiative to visit and learn from Taoism, the old man had served as a scoring officer. Even if he spoke with the county guard, he still regarded himself as an official elder. He said that the imperial examination system is well done, and it's up to you. Things are all a whip and a mark, a slap and a palm of blood. But if the imperial examination essays were poorly done, and the lack of fire was not enough, whatever you do will be wild fox zen evil spirits outside. Qin Pingan, a young prefect who came from a clear stream, has no choice but to nod vigorously. Otherwise you won't be able to cheat money. The old man talked about the sadness. The son-in-law who entered the Zhu's mansion was both right and talented. He refused to start a career. The young county governor was kind to comfort him. He only needs to raise a son early and teach him to read. After receiving my grandfather's Jinshi incense, what was the difficulty? At the end he also said categorically, in this way the lattice seal is still extremely stable. The old man was exasperated and when he was happy he gave 3,000 taels of silver. Xiao Mo, an entourage of the county guard, watched and listened, and only felt that he had learned a lot of humanity outside of books. In this scroll of heaven and earth, there are 3 colorful figures. In addition to this high-rise old man who was soon returned to the center of the imperial court by a paper from the capital, there is also a poor talent who has been trapped in the house for many years. The last one of the old man of the cooked food case is the old man Mao Kai who has a wealth of money and ran away a pig at the beginning of the year and a big pig at the end of the year. When the old man moved back to the capital with his family, the old man became black and white, but when Qin Pingan completed the water conservancy project, there was no more worries about water and waterlogging in his jurisdiction, and he was commended by the imperial court, but he was found brother Mao Kai and xianxia are still in color. Qin Pingan thought about it a bit, and had to visit the latter's house in a private visit. He saw the poor man saying goodbye to his wife at the door, patted his chest to ensure that the test was taken. Be patient for more than a month, you are definitely a lady of Jurin. The woman wiped her tears and said with a smile, I hope that both the wealth and the wealth will strive for some glory for the ancestor, and show some poverty for the lady, and then she will worship the sky and the earth. The result happened to be that Qin Pingan, the county guard, was good at managing the waters. The court ordered an exception to be a state school, and served as the chief examiner of this examination. From the examination papers, he extracted the imperial scholar's essay and circled his name. Painting is considered to be promoted to Jurin. From this moment on, as soon as he became a scholar of Master Jurin, he became black and white. As for that brother Mao Kai, when he was ill, he was still in color when he was dying. Qin Pingan was puzzled and had to sneak into the other's house and found that the man's hand was stretched out from the sheet, with outstretched, and he refused to swallow. Take one last breath. Qin Pingan couldn't laugh or cry, so he pushed the door to enter, lit the oil lamp with 2 dung grasses on the table and picked out one. When everyone looked at, the man on the bed nodded and lowered his hands, instantly losing his breath. Xiao Mo leaned against the door and shook his head helplessly. When Qin Pingan walked out of the house, the picture scroll changed and Xiao Mo seemed to be on the edge of the battlefield. The 2 armies were facing each other, only separated by a river. The riders and the characters were all ancient appearances. One side is strong, and the monarch is laughing with the soldiers around him. The enemy has more than enough soldiers, lack of benevolence and righteousness, and lack of benevolence and righteousness. After seeing that the other side was crossing the river with soldiers and horses, the military division suggested to the benevolent and righteous monarch to fight halfway. Not allowed, the 2 armies fought and were defeated. Qin Pingan kept watching from the sidelines. After the 2 scrolls were restored to their original shape, he went to the army and came to the car with the only colored figure. The latter asked, Is the widow wrong? Qin Pingan was silent with both hands hanging over his sleeves. How do the history books of later generations say that there are no people? Qin Pingan remained silent. Don't talk about history books, where's the marketplace, what about barnyard official history? The monarch was full of sadness and tears. He patted Che Shi repeatedly and said in grief and anger, There must be a good thing, right? Qin Pingan still did not give the answer directly. The right thing, the good thing, the immediate thing, the behind the scenes, the current, the eternal, are mixed together. How can we distinguish clearly? What's more, you are not a cultivator. In your position, you must always take care of the safety of the people of a country. As a battle master, you must always win the battle before you. This subjugated nation prince shouted benevolence and righteousness several times, and his figure disappeared. After that, Qin Pingan and Xiaomo met a lot of weird people and things. The two wandered in a flat boat on a moonlit night, drifting unsteadily with the water. When they reached an ancient bridge, they saw a picturesque small building, standing close to the edge of the water. It turned out that whenever there was a clear breeze and a bright moon, a woman's ethereal figure could be seen, between the curved sills of the corridor. Wandering and leaning, lingering and afflicted, throwing money into the water. Further on, thousands of miles away, Qin Pingan finally saw a handsome young man with a colorful stature. In the busy market, he let his servant kneel and sit on his back, ordering the book boy to play the flute and the crotch servant to work. When Xuanhuan flew, the servant started a little bit slowly, the son was dumbfounded, and he couldn't make a sound of tears. So he got up and ran wildly, jumped into a pond next to him and committed suicide by throwing water, but he was quickly picked up by the servant and kept dropping. Qin Pingan asked Xiaomo to do the work to help deliver the letters. For such a gifted and beautiful woman, even if the feelings are true, Qin Pingan does not bother to be the matchmaker. After arriving at a mountainside, an old monk brought a young novice down the mountain and met a woman. The old monk only said that the tiger at the foot of the mountain can eat people and cannot be approached and must be avoided. When he returned to the mountain, the little novice monk looked calm, touched his little bald head and said to the master, "I don't want everything, I just want the cannibal tiger under the mountain, and I always feel reluctant to let him go." Qin Pingan held back a laugh. After returning to the ruined temple in the mountains, the old monk actually chopped the wooden Buddha statue for firewood when it was cold, and immediately started to build a fire to warm him, turning his head to look at the scholar in the blue shirt who had gone to Beijing to take the exam. Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "Monk, you do it, I can't do it." The old monk asked why he couldn't do it. "Isn't it true that you never worship Buddha?" Qin Pingan just didn't move. So the master and apprentice went down the mountain and the old monk returned to the temple to chop the picture scroll of the Buddha statue and burn wood. In the end, Xiaomo couldn't stand it anymore and couldn't help but talk to the old monk. The old monk stood up and smiled, bowed his head with Xiaomo, folded his hands together. After the rain, Dao met an old woman, ragged and straddling a steed, with gorgeous saddles and bridles, which seemed a bit nondescript. The old woman looked kind, stopped her horse quickly and asked softly, "Where is the son?" Qin Pingan said that he was going to visit relatives in the suburbs. The old woman said, "The road is too long and there are many tigers. It is better to let me go to the humble house for a temporary rest, and leave early the next day so I have to be calm." Qin Pingan thanked him. The old woman rode a horse and walked slowly, leading the two of them along a secluded path for about 3 or 4 miles. The light in the forest was faintly visible. The old woman pointed at the light with a whip and said with a smile, "The house can be described as the 4 walls, except for the wooden bed and table, only a lantern hung on the wall." A woman slowly raised her head, plucking her temples, and her face was bleak. After that, the old woman's hospitality was quite plentiful, all of which were fish, but to replace pots with pots, Qin Pingan and Xiaomo need to fold branches as chopsticks. But the fish and rice are cold, which is difficult for ordinary people to swallow, but to Qin Pingan it is nothing. After the meal, Qin Pingan sat at the table. The earth was rugged and the table was slanted. Qin Pingan went to the woods outside the house, chopped firewood to make blocks and cushioned the table legs. The old woman thanked him, and the woman caught the lamp lice. Qin Pingan didn't ask Chinku people why the food and hospitality were so great, he just took out the dry tobacco sticks and began to swallow the clouds. The woman stared at it several times and she still wanted to talk. Qin Pingan asked, "Dare to ask the old mother what time is it now?" The old woman replied with a smile, "Just after the Chinese New Year, the previous meal was delivered by the host." Qin Pingan nodded suddenly and got up to leave, because there was only one room and it was inconvenient to spend the night, but he only said that he was in a hurry. The old woman couldn't keep it, so she said, "The son has traveled more than 50 miles along the previous road. There is an inn. My husband is working there. He is hunched and lame. He is easy to recognize. I begged the son to be annoying. Urged him to send some copper coins back in a hurry, only that he had enough food and clothing at home." Qin Pingan and Xiaomo left the forest house. If there is no accident, look at this place at dawn, but see the ancient mounds slumped, half dumped in the thorns of basil. The two of them did not rush, walked to the inn on foot and passed a large-scale tomb halfway the pines and cypresses. It was dawning and I saw an old man with a hunchback and lame, claiming to be an official's tombkeeper, working as a part-time job at the post station, and his wife was the servant girl in the official's house when he was alive. The old man said he wanted to borrow money. Go to the fragrant candle shop that specializes in fun business and buy some paper money. Chen Pingan took out some broken silver and gave it to the elderly, reminding him not to forget to buy paper money, house carts, horses, paper clothes and other things at the incense candle shop. It is best to ask the shop for a paper cigarette stick, together with tobacco was burned together. Xiaomo looked at the back of the old man staggering away and asked in his heart, "My son, does this well-informed fellow Wudong Taoist already know my pseudonym and Tao name now?" The pseudonym is unfamiliar and the Taoist name likes candles. Since it is the birth of life, it is also the birth of living beings. Qin Pingan shook his head, that fellow Taoist's intentions may have more meaning. After waiting for a while, the old man burned paper money and other things in front of the grave as agreed, and Qin Pingan and Xiaomo also changed a picture scroll. It was actually an ancestral temple. Above the incense case there was a covenant oath. The two words above, one as solid as a rock and the other erratic. Look at the content. The former is a woman's oath showing colorful, but the man's oath, such as the flowing water, was undulating, but it was pale in color, like ashes. It turned out that it was a local infatuated man and woman who often came to this temple to swear. If either party violates the vow, it will be held by the gods and convicted. Xiaomo raised his head and glanced at the two deity statues in the temple, one high and one low. The taller painted deity is the face of the young master, and the lower one is the face of Xiaomo. Xiaomo smiled. He hasn't seen him for 10,000 years. This fellow Taoist just learned these fancy magic techniques? Qin Pingan took the oath to testify with self, sighed and looked into the distance. With the magical powers of a party of gods, it is undoubtedly the infatuated woman and the grief. The former has died by vomiting blood and became lonely. Soul, wild, ghost. The corpse stopped in a Taoist temple and the man who was a little clever had moved to the land of jianghu. He had already married and established a business, and he had clung to high branches. A concubine of scholars. As a local god, Qin Pingan moved slightly in his mind, shrank the mountains and rivers and came to the border of his jurisdiction in one step, but it was difficult to move forward. Xiaomo suddenly said, "Cracks are beginning to appear in the golden body of the temple." Qin Pingan nodded and looked around the boundaries of the land. He found a local high-profile guest who was famous for being a chivalrous spirit. Then he entrusted a dream to this person, telling him the reason, and gave him a daughter as an entanglement in Beijing. After waking up from the dream, the high roller rode on a horse and rushed to the land of jianghu day and night without saying a word. In less than half a month, outside the Taoist temple where the spirits were stopped, there was a powerful man with a halberd and fist, leaping on a horse with a sword and running through a few doors. Carrying a package on his back immediately before the coffin, he lifted his beard and yelled that the heartless person had already been killed. Then wuxia unwrapped the package loaded with a head, threw it out hard and rolled off to the ground. It was the head of the grieving man. The female ghost wandering outside the Taoist temple with dim tears, and the tyrant who left on the horse, gave a blessing, gratitude, and then turned to the two local gods in the Taoist temple and bowed down to thank you. After that, he changed his identities and became two literati who visited friends. Near the friend's house, there is a rumor that there is a ghost house that has been abandoned for many years. Every night, on the pink wall, there are many bones and hideous faces. A merchant ventilated privately with the subordinates of the government, took a chance, moved his hands and feet on the deed of the house, and turned the house into a private house, which turned out to be a hot potato. Asking Taoist priests to go to the altar to do it, the eminent monk said it will not be a problem. Instead, he was teased by ghosts and said with a joke, "A person with a Taoist skill is more than that?" Later, Qin Pings and their friends did not believe in evil and thought they were upright gentlemen who had read sages' books, and they were also officials, so why not be afraid of this thing? As a result, I was so scared that I fled back in embarrassment after less than a stick of incense. I really don't know who can surrender in the world. Qin Pingan took Xiaomo to the ghost house in the dark, strolling in the courtyard, the horrible vision on the wall, and the infiltrating noises, just turning a blind eye to hearing. Xiaomo was holding a trekking stick, and after holding one hand he suddenly widened his eyes, and went to look at the blood-stained face on the wall. On the contrary, the latter seemed to be taken aback by this guy. Then Xiaomo turned his head and smiled. He asked, "My son, what should we do? Here, our swordsmanship and supernatural powers are obviously useless, so how can we reduce demons and exorcise demons? Is it possible to use affection to understand reason? Or to spend money to buy from the merchant? Let's put a seal on the door after the land lease is released?" Chen Pingan leaned on the pillars with his arms around his chest, looked at the wall, smiled and said, "The way of the world, the difference between yin and yang, fascinating in different paths and mediocrity. As long as you can respect ghosts and gods and stay away, nothing will happen." There was a faint sigh from the wall. A woman in colorful clothes, beautiful makeup, and curly tinting walked out of the wall and fell to the ground. "Mistress, words are comforting." The female ghost suddenly smiled like a flower. A door opened on the wall, and the woman stepped in first, turning her head and beckoning. Xiaomo couldn't help asking, "Why do you want to be so bend? That fellow Taoist has been playing with these little tricks, trying to figure something out." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "The boat will naturally be straight when it reaches the bridge head, so it's a roadside tour to see flowers." Chen Pingan almost mistakenly thought he had arrived at Baiwafuti. Along the way, the strange flowers and plants and the woman who accompanies each other have all kinds of charm and variety. Finally, I came to a gorgeous hall. Outside the hall, there was a girl who looked like a roll call, and reported the names of Chen Pingan and the two human scribes. The girl was only 14 years old, she was slender and weak, she walked slowly, suspicious of joints. After Chen Pingan took Xiaomo across the threshold, he saw the lady in the palace sitting high. Feng Yi made an appointment, wearing a green crown on her head, like a concubine. There are more than 10 maids in the hall, all of them are beautiful. As a result, the lady who sat in the main seat said that you are both talented scholars, and she began to ask for singing and poetry. Chen Pingan was just drinking, a kind of so-called 100-flower cream. As soon as he heard that he wanted to sing with poems, he asked Xiaomo to do it for him. Good guy, Xiaomo didn't have stage fright at all, raised his glass and got up, and directly gave dozens of poems about flowers and plants, and they were all collections of poems that Xiaomo pieced together. Chen Pingan lowered his head to support his forehead, and did not dare to see anyone. Those women were very supportive, surprised, and seemed to be impressed by Xiaomo's talents. In the end, even if Xiaomo helped the fool pass the level, both of them were still holding wine glasses in their hands, and Xiaomo smiled and said, "I always feel that I'm still in the mood." Chen Pingan threw the slightly heavy wine glass in his hand to Xiaomo, and patted Xiaomo on the shoulder again. "In the future, I will ask more about swords and fight less about poems." Already in a busy market, there are elderly people who carry flowers and sell them. They are white and red, very cute. When the sun was warm, the old man unloaded his shoulders, took out a fan and fanned the breeze. Even if the old man is not a colorful figure, only the folding fan in his hand is really not like a village man's hand. Above the fan there is a fan. Poem. The handwriting is graceful, the words are beautiful women's thoughts, and there is an inscription at the end of the fan. Chen Pingan patted Xiaomo on the shoulder again. Xiaomo looked puzzled. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Isn't it still unfinished? By coincidence, I have memorized so many books, learned a lot of knowledge and learned a lot of things at a fair price. The next step is to use it." Xiaomo was puzzled, but Chen Pingan looked more pretending to be stupid and smiled. "Don't be stunned," and quickly asked the old man the source of the fan. "If I pretend to be your entourage, you will say that you are the scholars who came to Beijing to rush for the exam. Maybe there will be a wedding night in the bridal chamber waiting for you." Xiaomo glanced at the fan, frowned, then shook his head. "This young lattice poem is really like Xiaomo's," Chen Pingan said with a serious face. "Xiaomo, what's the matter? Are so many talented scholars and beautiful ladies' novels in vain? This kind of poetry sings and praises each other's poems and must not be added. To portray talents and beautiful ladies, we must say their poems. No matter how well they are written, novelists have to write many good poems for them." Xiaomo's head was as big as a dustpan. After that, as the sun said, he was almost going to spend a candle night with a young woman in the bridal chamber, but in the end, the two parties exchanged the token of love, which was regarded as an affair and passed this level. Seeing Gongzi's expression a little dignified, Xiaomo immediately asked in his heart, "Master, is it a series of calculations?" Chen Pingan shook his head and said, "It's not a calculation, it's a shame." After that, Chen Pingan became the king of a country in a peaceful and prosperous age. He acted absurdly. He had just given a talented young girl as the champion. There was a constant stream of people seeking calligraphy and poetry. During the period of the girl, I saw one in the building. The young scholar who waited hard because of his lameness, he used subtle words and sarcasm. The scholar was born a tycoon, but he didn't know what the young girl meant to be teasing. Made a big joke. From then on, holding a grudge, dropped the glass and said furiously, "Did the daughter of the living prime minister bully me, the son of the dead prime minister?" This person kept planning, causing the girl's portal to cause a series of misfortunes. Fortunately, her father was a high-powered official, and was also a leader of the Qinglu. It was still difficult to settle a series of disturbances, and waited until one day. Discussing the matter with his daughter, the talent of Xianxia understands the reason for the twists and turns, and then he finds a son-in-law for his daughter's list. There is an extra son-in-law in the family. After that, the son-in-law joins forces to deal with the conspiracy and tricks that claim to be the son of the dead prime minister. Logically speaking, the ending is of course that evil does not suppress the righteousness and people are happy. But Qin Pingan, the ninth five-sovereign monarch, just watched the farce coldly. At the critical moment, he did not say a word of justice for the official Xianxia who was imprisoned, let alone the number one who was about to travel thousands of miles. The decree of life-saving, only before the old girl who had been a woman, was about to become a church club, did she put down a secret decree and then left the palace. Looking at the embroidered building in the distance, the emperor asked the man, thinking back then, "What was in your mind when you were here? Now that it has been so many years, can you still remember it?" The lame man nodded, saying that he remembered it clearly. After that, His Majesty the Emperor who got the real answer went to the so-called imprisonment. Through the iron bars he looked at the old Xianxia who was kowtow. Your Majesty the Emperor knelt down and asked the celestial official if he still remembered. "I remember a sentence from that year." The thatched old Xianxia was dazed, and His Majesty the Emperor reminded him, "What was your first sentence after learning that the lame young man was teased by your daughter for the first time?" Where did Lao Xianxia remember those old things? So he had to continue to kowtow and ask His Majesty for extra-legal mercy. Just listen to the Emperor's Majesty slowly saying, "You said it's all right at the time, and then you started to discuss with your daughter how to clean up the mess." Lao Xianxia raised his head, becoming more and more at a loss. Where did he go wrong? Qin Pingan stood up, looked at the master Xianxia who was a real person in history and asked, "It's all right? Why is it all?" Finally Qin Pingan said heartily, "Open the door." Xiaomo sighed. That fellow Wudong Taoist really opened the door. Then they came to a cliff cave and saw a Taoist man sitting and passing away, his nose hanging from a jade tendon and a ruler, a gold shining treasure book in his sleeve, and an ancient pine crutch at his feet. After Qin Pingan and Xiaomo appeared here, the long river of time began to slowly flow backwards, and the lame man came back to life, standing up, pick up the crutches and backward walking. The Taoist learns 100 birds' language in the countryside, and walks in the market with clothes, sings and walks, hangs a scoop on his waist, sips water and drank alcohol, drunk in the wind and rain, sleeps on the road, is good at drawing dragons and spits out alcohol on ruined paper. On the upper side the smoke puffs up and the scales are vivid. Time went back 100 years, until the lame Taoist recovered his youthful appearance and traveled to an isolated island overseas. There are survivors on the islands and mountains. The folk customs are simple and admired for writing, but there is no teacher and he has never learned a school. This person wrote a word on his palm. Taught to those young children who came to inquire about the text, only charged 1 word for each word. For several years, copper coins piled up like a mountain. Qin Pingan also visited the house, and every other month, with this person who had no master's name but had the truth of the master, he only asked for 1 word. The only requirement was that the book was on paper, not in the palm of his hand. So Qin Pingan must bring wine. In the end, Qin Pingan used 7 pots of wine and 7 copper coins in exchange for 7 pieces of paper and 7 words. Spring. Book. Sound of water. Mountain. Sword. Water. Simple. This landscape painting took the most time. Looking at the burning degree of the White Horse's Gap talisman, almost 3 months have passed. After that, Qin Pingan and Xiaomo came to the last picture of the lives of others. After a great war there were cake sellers in rural shops. Every evening, a woman came to the shop with copper coins in her hand. She could just buy a piece of cake. The shop owner asked the reason and said that her husband had not returned home. Life or death is unknown, the children at home are hungry so they can only come here to buy cakes to satisfy their hunger. The shop owner didn't doubt it at first, but after a long time he found that in the money jar he would get a piece of paper money every day. Some neighbors said that ghosts came here to buy cakes. The next day the shop owner took all the buyers' money. They all quietly poured into the water bowl. It turned out that it was the woman's copper coin floating in the water, but not sinking to the bottom of the bowl alone, and she was frightened suddenly. On the third day the woman came to buy bread again, and the shopkeeper pretended to not know the truth. Just waiting for the woman to leave, she immediately called her neighbors in the neighborhood, lit torches and chased the woman. Looking back, the woman looked complicated, like a bird, looming, and finally everyone found a dilapidated coffin inside. People are bones, only the baby in the coffin is like alive, no different from a living person holding a bread in his hand, and he is not afraid of seeing people. The people felt pity and embraced it, and the ghost woman stood in the distance, raising their sleeves to cover their faces, and there was a whimper. After that, every night if the child is unable to sleep, it seems that someone is babbling and tapping on the bedding, and the child sleeps soundly. One day after that, the woman finally disappears and the child grows up. Xianxia's daily life is no different from ordinary people, but she often cries silently, just because she can't remember his parents' appearance. Qin Pingan stayed in this picture all the time, doing nothing, saying nothing. Xiaomo didn't urge but just accompanied his son quietly, or walked in the afterglow of the dusk, or stood by the shop, or followed the people holding torches, walking in the night, or sitting on the steps outside the door, listening to the children in the house waking up to a deep sleep. Until 10 hours have been used up, Xiaomo again stood in the cake shop with his son this day, and the two stood beside the bowl of water. Qin Pingan still watched the sight of the copper coin not sinking into the water again and again. Xiaomo, he sighed and said softly in his heart, "My son, you can break the illusion here only by telling the truth in one word. It's time for us to go." Qin Pingan's lips moved slightly but he remained silent. Xiaomo hesitated to speak several times but finally did not speak. The truth is too cruel. It may be that the woman has not died, and the baby has died prematurely. Just like the man who has never returned to his hometown, he may have died in a foreign land, he may not have died, who knows. Xiaomo suddenly looked up, the surrounding scene disappeared, and a sycamore tree appeared in front of him as if growing in the water. However, Qin Pingan lowered his head, just looking down at the towering tree that seemed to hang upside down. A plain tree with yellow and fallen leaves all over the ground. Xiaomo glanced at it. It was the flowing scene of that leaf in the world, walking around and watching flowers each with his own life. In an instant the originally bright and glorious world became dim and unclear, and there was another light floating above the water. After that, it was scattered like the stars in the sky and scattered among the mountains and the earth, gradually dense, bright and shining, tens of millions, uncountable. Xiaomo suddenly subconsciously moved one step horizontally. It turned out that it was Qin Pingan who was beside him unknowingly, but he had already become the appearance of wearing a bright red robe, his face blurred, and his body and soul were all intertwined with crisscrossing lines. About Mo was overwhelmed by a town demon tower. There was a blur of afterimages flashing through his body, the sound of souls crisscrossing, and the trembling loudly. It was far better than the sound of gold and stone in the world, just like the appearance of several swords of the Great Wall at the same time. The Last Hermit. Sword of Coming Chapter 923. The Fengyuan Ferry is approaching Xindu Mountain. The immortal named Dragon Gate, at Taishu Mountain has indeed visited the surrounding mountains and rivers of Xindu Mountain. When Yufeng returned to Mishua Peak, he saw that the disciple was sitting on the railing of a viewing platform with Zheng Yugan and chatting. Yomo responded to the old saying about women being extroverted. Taningzhou was talking to Zheng Yugan, "If you can't do anything, it's better than anyone else." Sure enough, the senior brothers and sisters, including themselves, are of course the uncles and uncles of many Taishishan monks. Sure enough, he didn't want to embarrass the disciple, so his figure quietly fell on the ridge of the roof. It is rare to be a master to do this. After all, he was a fairy and he was not an ordinary fairy. Gui Xinyu couldn't see it and he was able to tell at a glance. For example, Yunjing Mountain and Sumyao Mountain, which form a three-mountain pattern with Xindu Mountain, really saw through the blindness, and the two stone steels on the top of the mountain were also seen clearly. Cui Dongshan shrunk the mountains and rivers, stepped to his side and said with a smile, "Long Mendo has friendly eyesight." Sure enough, he smiled and said, "It's an offense for failing to control my eyes." Cui Dongshan waved his hand and smiled. Fellow Taoist Long Men said this out of the blue. Sure enough, I looked around and couldn't help but admire. Leishan and rocks are already another kind of knowledge. In my opinion, there is also a gully in the chest, but it is actually more difficult than painting. Moving a few hills, moving a few rivers, it's not difficult to piece together a picture that is dependent on mountains and rivers. It's difficult to fill in without traces and agree with each other on the road. Just say that on this dense snow peak the earth, wood, roads, flowers and trees, and the smoke and clouds are rendered temporarily seem rough, but in fact they are all wonderful. I will spend some time in the future transplanting old trees, sparsely and obliquely manage powder books high and low shades. It is really a mountain and water resort. Friends of Longmen Taoist have a good reputation. Chui Dongshan hugged the back of his head with his hands, shook his head and smiled. On the scale of the weather, the old blind man who is no more than 100,000 mountains. On the subtlety, we have an old cook on the Luapa mountain who is the real expert. Sure enough, he laughed. It's like sincerely praising a person for their good poetry, and the person who is praised says that he is inferior to Bai Yi and Suzi. How can people answer the conversation? Chui Dongshan looked into the distance. Fengyuan ferry boat was about to dock. He patted the roof with his hands, his slid all the way out of the roof and finally fell to the observation deck. Facing this white-clothed boy, Zheng Yuqian and Tan Yingzhou both had the same title, Sect Master Chui. Chui Dongshan nodded to the little girl in greeting, then turned to look at Zheng Yugan and complained, "Call the Lord, call the little brother." Zheng Yuqian had to change his name. On the side of Suzerain Chui, who is easygoing and witty, Zheng Yugan is actually not too restrictive. Chui Dongshan said goodbye, his figure turned into a white rainbow, and went straight to the wind and kite ferry. Seeing the pair of masters and apprentices Lu Jinglong and Bai Shou, Chui Dongshan smiled and said hello, Sect Master Lu brother Bai. When Bai Shou saw that there was only Chui Dongshan and no one, he was relieved and smiled and clasped his fists. He made an exception and did not call Chui Dongshan a brother. Instead he used a formal name, Sect Master Chui. Chui Dongshan suddenly said to Lu Jinglong, Sect Master Lu worked hard. Lu Jinglong had to pay back. Miyu was in a temporary retreat. The fairy had already sent a letter to Mi Xiefeng from the Flying Sword. Chui Dongshan asked in his heart, when will Sect Master Lu retreat? Lu Jinglong said frankly, it's hard to say for the time being. Of course, Chui Dongshan is very concerned about this matter. In the future, if your husband needs help in the Qingming world, the least hesitating and able to help him, except for the teacher, it must be Lu Xianyang and Lu Jinglong. Maybe a Zhang Shanfeng will be added, but this high disciple who is lying on the top of the mountain, he seems to be really not anxious about the matter of breaking through cultivation. Leading the group of people off the ferry personally, Chui Dongshan suddenly remembered something and rubbed his chin. Isn't it unintentional? His own Qingping Jianzong. Lu Xianyang's Longquan Sword Sect, Lu Jinglong's Taihui Sword Sect, plus the Dragon Elephant Sword Sect and Duckweed Sword Lake? There are already 5 kendo sections. But Chui Dongshan was also curious about what Zhang Shanfeng hadn't come yet. The palm rhythm of Pushen Yunkatang is already in Shindu Mountain. On the side of Mixifeng Mansion, I learned that my mountain owner and Cheningguan asked me for a fist, and he was so energetic from the end that he succeeded in returning to the real world. Tan Rong hugged his fist and congratulated him. Congratulations, Shanju. It is indeed gratifying that Wu Fu is in the end, it is the natural resources and the opportunity to be indispensable, and the level of the end is full of vitality, return to the truth and greatness, and it is even more difficult to think about breaking through. Yi Yunyun nodded and said, thanks to Qin Jiangxian's help, I don't need Pushen to repay this favor, I will take care of it myself. Anyway, she will serve as the honorable guest of Shindu Mountain, and she is also a Jade Pure Realm practitioner, and she certainly has no shortage of opportunities to repay favors. Tan Rong remembered a secret incident and asked, the Patriarch's Hall has produced an extra biography for no reason. What is going on? It turned out that there was a black-clothed boy whose alias was Chui Wanzhan. Under Tan Rong's secret arrangement, he had used a relatively unobtrusive method to become the latest disciple of Yunkatang. He claimed that Chui Wanzhan was in the 6th realm, Pure Takeo. Tan Rong had previously received a secret letter from Yi Yinyun. Although the Master of Law was confused, he could only do so. This kind of thing, logically speaking, does not conform to the ceremonial system of the Patriarch Hall. After reaching the Mishue peak of Shindu Mountain, Tan Rong knew that the young man turned out to be the first sect master of the lower sect of Luapa Mountain. Yi Yunyun shook her head and said, don't ask. Tan Rong stared, and he was about to break the casserole and asked to the end, is it true that my Pushensheng Law is a decoration? There will always be a day when things will come to light. You might as well watch the changes in Tanzhong Law. Anyway, it's not a bad thing. Shui Huai hurriedly helped warm up the field and said with a smile, it's just that Sect Master Chui took such a weird pseudonym, Chui Wanzhan? Yi Yunyun thought for a while, like Jin Jiazhou, there is a long-standing martial artist who has been famous for a long time, nicknamed xuanhuan? Tan Rong had to put down his doubts for the time being and nodded. I heard a friend on the mountain say that his real name Han Guanghu is the top spot in Takeori of Jin Jiazhou, or a dynasty general of Zhenghua. Han Guanghu is one of the people who presided over the battle in the terrible war in the mountains and rivers. He lined up his troops and was very well organized. In the end, together with the born sword fairy Su Jun, he stopped the frustration. Wanyan Laojing, I heard that Han Guanghu was seriously injured because of this, and fell into a state, so he was unable to participate in the proceedings of the Confucian temple. Xuanhuan sighed, I'm also a man. The sequelae of a pure samurai's fall is greater than the aftermath of the fall of a qishur. Tan Rong suddenly said, is that Han Guanghu who assisted and dismantled the six-term monarch? It's no wonder that Tan Rong is lonely and ignorant. Tong Yezhou was already blocked from news, and Pushun Yunkatang was notoriously disliked to inquire about Shan's foreign affairs. At the beginning, even the neighbor Aquarius in the north, the monks on Tonghishao Mountain, at least had heard of some hills. The southernmost old dragon city, the Zhuang dynasty, which had more sword repairs, belonged to Baiyu together with Taiping Mountain. It is estimated that no matter how many times it grows, it will be completely blinded. The only monk who knows his name is probably the rebellious and unruly literary saint leader, embroidered tiger Cui Yang. As for the Wufu Song Changjing of the Dai dynasty, it was only after he reached the end that Tong Yezhou began to hear about it. Tan Rong suddenly took out a Shanshui mansion report from his sleeve, and slammed it on the case in front of him. Shanju, let's talk about it. Except for Sect Master Cui, how many things are you hiding from me? Xuehuai's face was stern, and he tried not to laugh out loud. Tan Zhonglu's temperament is not small today. Tan Rong pointed to the Di Bao and said angrily, it's a big matter, what is it to hide from me? My discipline is really okay. I got a Shanshui mansion report from Dequan Tayedu Taoyuan other industry. This is because Tan Rong came to Xiandushan by ferry. I only learned about it through the hands of friends. Generally speaking, Howren's diaries given by a Zongzi Xianfu are more particular. There are many unwritten rules here. Even if it is some extremely important exclusive news, other Shanshui Debaos are not very good at it. Copy it, because a good talking sect may open one eye and close one eye, but if you encounter someone with a bad temper, you have to directly scold it. It is even possible to ask the teacher about the crime, such as there. In Beiju Luzhou, the number of times the Zushitang was unstable due to such a small matter could not be counted with one hand. Yi Yunyun was confused, stretched out her hand, grabbed the Dibao in her hand and scanned it quickly. She stretched out her hand and rubbed her eyebrows. Tan Rong, believe it or not, I just learned about these things on the Dibao. If you hadn't used this diary report, I would have been kept in the dark even if I had attended the ceremony of the Lower Soul Mountain sect and became the famous guest of Qingping Sword sect. Xuehuai became very curious at once, and when he and his master were about to come to the report, he suddenly widened his eyes, his expression dignified, and his heartstrings became tense in an instant. Tan Rong saw that the expressions of the two of them did not seem to be false. Shanju, in the future, we will not be blind to the world in Pushun anymore. Yi Yunyun nodded and said, Jinghua Shueiyue and Shanshui Dibao will be given to you to take care of them in the future, asking people to give them and asking for money. Tan Rong asked in a low voice, how did Qin Jianxian do it? Earlier in Pushun, from the first sight of Qin Pingan, Tan Rong thought he hadn't underestimated him at all. Yi Yunyun glanced at this self-rule, it was the barren world I went to, you ask me? Tan Rong couldn't help sighing. This feat, outsiders like me, even if they just look at the Dibao, just think about it, they will make Dao's heart unstable. Xuehuai took the Dibao and browsed it twice, feeling deeply impressed by Tanzangla's heartfelt words. The hermit led and Lu Xin went with him. Ning Yao, the first person in the colorful world, engraved the old sword fairy Qi Tingji at the head of the city, the criminal officer Haosu, and the great sword fairy Lu Ji. This kind of battle? This trip successfully killed two ascended realm great monsters. One of them was the great disciple of the great ancestor of Toyua Mountain. Traveling together, leveling an ancient battlefield in an instant, destroying the White Flower City with the name of the Zong, rioting the Moor dynasty, interrupting the highest fairy hairpin city in the world, fighting against the throne demon Scarlet Concubine, dragging it down the river, the sword opened to support Yueshan Mountain, and moved Mingyue outside to the Qingming world. Bai Yujing was really invincible to personally lead this round of Mingyue. Don't say they were done one by one, they were all things that I didn't even dare to think about. Even Xuehuai was a little bit regretful. I only hate myself for not being a sword repairer. Tan Rong asked, Shan Lord, if Qin Jianxian puts aside his swordsmanship and just as a pure martial artist he asks Wu Pan, how will he win or lose? Xuanhuan was actually very curious about this. Since his master had already lost, then only Wu Pan could contend with Chen Shanju in terms of boxing techniques. The world-ending warriors are different from the great monks at the top of the mountain. Every millennium has the big year and young years. The difference is obvious. The total number of the 10 worlds of warriors does not fluctuate much. Except for the divine continent of the earth, the rest of the 8 continents are spread out, roughly 2 per continent, and the number of people who have good deeds has been roughly counted. In the so-called world martial arts in a small year, when the situation is not good, the end of the 8 continents has never been less than 14 people. No matter how good it is, there will be no more than 20 people. On the other side of Beiju Luzhou, Guyu of the Great Seal dynasty a few years ago, and Yuankishin Jianxian Jiue, died in exchange for their lives. So now the great masters of martial arts in the 3 continents in the east, in addition to the masters and apprentices of Qin Pingan and Pei Qian, there are also Dali Song Changjing, Lion Peak Li Er, Wang Fushuan, Wu Xing Wu Tan and Pushen Huang Yiyun. Yi Yunyun obviously had an early draft, and she didn't hesitate to give the conclusion in her mind, if only the boxing score is superior Wu Pan will win, but if it is a fight Qin Pingan will live. Tan Rong smiled and said, it's okay, anyway now Qin Jianxian is considered half of us from Tongyi's Hao. Shui Huai originally wanted to agree, but Yi Yunyun was already annoyed and said, point your face. Shui Huai nodded immediately and said, it's not appropriate. Qin Shanju may not be willing to admit this statement. Furthermore, if this statement spreads, in fact our Tong Yezhou is also shameless. Luapa Mountain is only Tongyi's Hao where the next sect is located. As the head of the upper sect, Qin Pingan, the family register and the genealogy of the mountain are still in Beipingzu. Tan Rong glanced at Shui Huai who was on the verge of rebellion, and said with a smile, the grass on the wall, fall with the wind. The veteran General Yao Zhen is compiling a military book at his desk. In addition to summarizing the gains and losses of his lives battles and training records, he also organizes the martial arts experience of the Yao family of the Frontier Army. The Old Man Army left something for the Dequan dynasty during his lifetime. This mansion is probably the only house on Mishue Peak that uses the Earth Dragon technique on the mountain. The ground is warm and the climate is like sunshine in spring. Therefore there is no need for braziers in the house, and no need to wear thick cotton clothes or fox fur. Yao Xinji knocked on the door and entered, limping and sitting at the table. Master Fu Yin just got a piece of information from Mirage City, gently put that piece of information on the table and said with a smile, Grandpa, this Yu dynasty is a bit interesting. Now the old emperor hasn't left yet. I have already started the matter secretly. As long as the crown prince Yu Linyu ascends the throne, he will immediately change the name to the first year of the Shenlong. It seems to be the result of the consultation with the Qingtian supervisor, Lu Bilong, the true figure of Jitsue who protects the country. The Yu dynasty, which has a close relationship with Lao Longqing, is very good at planning. The old general smiled. It's not considered an officialdom to burn a cold stove. I'm afraid that a hot face will stick to a cold buttocks, but it won't be self-defeating. The newly appointed king of Donghai Sea is Wang Zhu, the only true dragon in the world. The name Shenlong used by the Yu dynasty was obviously an undisguised expression of goodwill. I just don't know that the legendary ascendant female sister in Aquarius Island can't accept this love. The old man picked up the information, glanced a few times and said with a smile, His Royal Highness Yu is still quite good now. With the help of General Huang Shanshou, there is a Jitsue temple in the capital, and there is also a Green Seal sect on the mountain. It has also established a relationship with the old Longqing in the north. When the new monarch is changed, the country's momentum will rise, which is the general trend. Yao Xinji curled his lips, obviously not having a good impression of both the Jitsue temple and the Green Seal school. Once in a war he ran faster than a rabbit. He learned the tortoise method and had to shrink his head when he had to shrink his head. The old man refolded the spy and returned it to his grandson and said softly, Don't look down on these people who don't take their face seriously. If you provoke them, it is easy to succeed and fail. Furthermore, you have to admit that only real villains and hypocrites can do things, but honest men cannot do it. Seeing Yao Xinji still a little disapproving, the old man sighed, It is not a better moral article that defeats moral articles, but some indiscriminate histories of barnyard officials. Often hundreds of thousands of words of work cannot be worth a later article. A novel of a few hundred words. Yao Xianzi's expression was gloomy, because he thought of the emperor's majesty, and many privately engraved books are still banned today. Fortunately, compared to the grand event when literati and scholars had almost one copy after a great war, it has disappeared a lot. You must know that when it was the most extreme of the year, even the civilian officials on duty in the Hanlin Academy would have some people reading these things, and the books had just changed their covers. Yao Jin smiled and said, "The officialdom is not better than scholarship. How to use gentlemen and villains is a university question. The person who uses the best is called the top of the world, and may be the big brother of Qin Pingan. Otherwise, wouldn't you think that Dallas civil and military affairs are selfless, upright people and ethical scholars? Are they born capable officials?" Yao Xinji rubbed his chin. "If I could be like Mr. Chen, there is such an unrefined brother, Tusk." The old man shook his head and said, "You just stand up talking and don't hurt your back. In fact, there are such seniors who are under a lot of pressure. I don't even say that seniors are embroidered tigers. Like the Fonlay Garden in Aquarius Island, believe it or not, if Lu Ba there is no senior brother Huang He in the bridge, maybe he is now a sword fairy in the Yupu realm." Once Li Tuanjing left, once he succeeded as the owner of the garden, he couldn't help but catch his breath. Baqiao doesn't have that kind of indomitable mind. I believe that the reason why the Yellow River rushed to the wild battlefield, besides that he really wanted to go there to practice swords, was also a little pressure on Lu Baqiao. A family, a sect, it is probably the case. When one person is too eye-catching, the others will inevitably be eclipsed. Others will either develop inertia and lie under the big tree to enjoy the cool, or it is easy to lose heart. For example, their Yao family, is it not the same reason? Yao Xinji asked tentatively, "Grandpa, you really don't persuade Mr. Qin anymore?" If Grandpa is really determined and tried his best to persuade Mr. Qin to serve as the national teacher of the Daquan dynasty, and dare not say that he will definitely succeed, there is still some hope after all. The old man shook his head and smiled. Being old and not dying is a thief. Relying on the old to sell the old is even more annoying. Do more things that are beautiful for people, and less things that are difficult for strong people. Yao Xinji knew that his grandfather was determined, so he didn't say anything more. Unexpectedly, the old man said with a smile, "Furthermore, what difficulties Daquan really has to do if he wants to do what he wants to do? Do I need you to say hello to Xian Dushan? I don't see it." Yao Xinji was amazed. "Jiang is still hot." The old man picked up his pen again and wrote a book and said with a soft smile, "Life is full of flavors, no salt, no spicy, no joy." Just now when he wrote about the selection of military commanders, he had a little chat with his grandson, and he remembered a sentence for no reason, so he wrote the phrase, "Be strong and not rash." The old man only wrote a few words, then put aside his pen again and turned his head and looked out the window. Great work, vigorous and upright, pure and refined. Clouds move and rain and the world is peaceful. There may always be a few truths, maybe it was what it was like 10,000 years ago, it is what it is now, and it will still be like 10,000 years later. Huang Ting wears a crown of hibiscus on his head and carries a long sword. Next to him stood the fellow Taoist Negative Mountain who was the shopkeeper of the Moxiandu shop. Yu Jishan leaned on the railing and said with a smile, "This Shindu Mountain, looking at the family business, is not too big. There is only one Shindu Mountain, although there are several peaks suitable for cultivation, it can support the opening of 5 or 6 earthly monks' mansions and Taoist temples. But for a sect, it still seems a bit barren." Huang Ting was a little absent-minded, wandering all over the world. Yu Jishan asked, "Miss Huang, that guy who helped us match up, what on earth is it possible for you to be the chief guest officer?" You Negative Mountain really couldn't see the depth of the other side's Taoism and guard against thieves. "I'm always worried that this guy will have something to do with my favorite girl, Huang. It's a rival." Yu Angshan learned that Huang Ting had taken a trip to the colorful world. She is now a sword fairy in the Jade State. Therefore, Yu Angshan is full of ambitions about the reconstruction of the Taiping Mountain. "I need to smash the pot and sell the iron by myself, and I am absolutely willing without frowning." As an ancient Negative Mountain fish, he was still a nascent soul realm cultivator, and his road-building skills were quite different from those of ordinary Qi practitioners. It's a pity that the threshold is too high to turn the river into a jiao. I used to not dare to act rashly. Because of the avenue's origin, once you walk through the water, you need to walk on a Negative Mountain. The higher the rank of the mountain, the better. Involved in a very dangerous landscape dispute, so in the future, there will be some disturbances in the river crossing. What's more, it's not just a one-time walk and you will be able to succeed, just like the eel spirit on the side of the river buried in the big spring in the early years. Hasn't it been blocked by the goddess of the river water again and again? Therefore, the monks in the upper 5 realms of the Haoran world do not have many choices. One is the old ancestor of Xingyang Mountain who served as the protector of the immortal mansion, or a tycoon like the Jiang family of Yunlin. Get a genealogy status, otherwise you can only be like Mrs. Maihuiwanzi Yen Yen, who can only escape the hanging mountain and find a stable dojo. Therefore, Yuangshan's earliest plan was to travel to Aiazhao and find Wei Shi, to see if he can be combined with the eyes of this respected old to become the master of a peak. Wei Shi has the nickname of the Master of 37 Peaks, among which are the peaks of Lianri Peak and Baiyue Mountain. Has long been known as Dong Hao Ran, who are all spirits who practice in it. Huang Ting didn't care about negative mountain's thoughts of taking advantage of words, but just reminded, in this Shindu mountain, remember to take your temper, be cautious in your words and deeds, and don't take your realm too seriously. Yu Jishan joked, I'm a veteran nascent soul monk anyway, plus this avenue roots and feet in this Shindu mountain, don't I walk sideways? Huang Ting couldn't help smiling and said, is the nascent soul realm great? Walking sideways? One accidentally is going to walk sideways. In fact, Yu Jishan didn't take his realm seriously. He just wanted to talk a few more words with Ms. Huang, and continued to look for words. Could it be that there is a stranger from outside the world hiding in Shindu Mountain? From the corner of Yu Minshan's eyes, he looked at the woman's smiling face. It was so beautiful. No wonder I fell in love at first sight. It's a pity that girl Huang can get her heart, but she may not get her body. I saw a Yufeng figure returning from a long journey back to Mishue Peak. It was the monk named Guoran. Huang Ting asked, Tai Shushan, have you always heard of it? Yu Jishan couldn't help but said, I'm a deaf person and I must have heard of Tai Shushan. If it is a good choice to seek refuge in Wei Shi, then for the monks of their quirky backgrounds, Taishu Mountain in the Middle-earth Divine Continent is a sacred place fascinated by them. Sovereign Guo Uding, the road number is Yu Ming. This Ascension Realm great monk, rumored that he once slashed xuanhuan road. Even though he was on the road to the underworld, he successfully beheaded a ghost and retreated all over his body. Guo Uding's high combat power and killing power are by no means comparable to the old Ascension Realm of Nangwangwing and his like. The real fire dragon once had a joke. Fortunately, there is only one realm above the fairy and below the 14th. It is a pity that in the early years of Tongyi's Hao, the news on the mountain was too closed, and there were only some old calendars about the strange things about the Taishu Mountain in the Middle Earth. U-Negative Mountain is just a shopkeeper at the Xinjia ferry. It was originally an evacuation, and it could not be called a small hiding in the city. There are 2 places in the world and we must go in the future. Except for the non-flowering Taishu Mountain, Baidi City is located among the colorful clouds. Huang Ting continued to ask, have you met the little girl named Taningzhou? Yu Jishan nodded and said, I've seen it a few times and the little girl is always with a little spirit around. I advised the 2 children a few words, but don't go around like this outside the mountain, it is easy to get an accident. Today Haoran's world is peaceful, but for the monks who came from the mountain and the spirits, it is a kind of real troubled world. Fortunately, if the realm is high, it is good to say that it is recorded in the academy earlier, and it is considered a guide. And an amulet, but the monster trainers under the immortals, especially the lower 5 realms, are now like a yellow mud in the crotch. If it weren't for the head of the Dafu Academy, Qing Longzhou, and the academy quickly issued a clear law, otherwise the local monster clan of Tongyi's Hao, regardless of whether they are able to refine their shape, will probably end up miserably. U-Negative Mountain is a busy person. He usually likes to go out and wander around. He has visited Qingping, Zhanxian and Mishue many hills for a long time, and he is very familiar with the 2 children of Taningzhou and Zheng Yugan. According to Tai Shushan's genealogy, the little girl only needs to call Guo Uding her master. Huang Ting leaked the secret for Yuangshan. You said Taningzhou travels outside the mountain, can something happen easily? It is true that accidents are only the ones who provoke the little girl. Yu Jishan was shocked and couldn't believe it. What? That little girl movie is Guo Uding's grandson? Only then did I realize that I was so close to Taishu Mountain. Huang Ting nodded and said, the master of Taningzhou who you said was the sure enough, that you didn't take the name, is actually Guo Uding's little disciple. A real immortal, once in Nan Pasuazhou, joined hands with the sword fairy Chao Shi to defend the Jinhai Tower. At the Confucian Temple he has done a lot of battle. As for the killing power, it's ugly, just use one. There is no difficulty in crushing a nascent infant realm with a finger. U-Negative Mountain swallowed. Hurry up and think about it carefully to see if you have inappropriate words and deeds. Fortunately, he didn't hook up with the brother of the Dragon Gate. Huang Ting asked, What is the name of the closed disciple of Zheng Juzhong in Baidi City? Yunggizan suddenly envied him. It seems to be a goddess, Gukan, a madman. It is said that he was born in Lizhu Dongtian, Aquarius Island, and somehow became Mr. Zheng's heir. It is really a Hongfu Qitian. Yuangshan didn't dare to be like Huang Ting, taking Gua outing and Zheng Juzhong one bite, and he didn't have Huang Ting's kind of mind. Don't blame yourself for being timid because it's not Jianxiu. After waiting for a long time before Huang Ting could say anything, Yunishan had to ask carefully, then? Huang Ting can never pick up Gukan casually. Could it be that the little spirit named Zheng Yugan has any connection with Baidi City? Yujishan's eyes lit up. He reached out his hand to stop Huang Ting's words and replied, I understand. This little spirit is a direct disciple of the Lioli Pavilion of Baidi City? It must be. Mr. Zheng of Beidasheng has a junior named Lu Daochun, who is the master of the Lioli Pavilion, who is famous all over the world, and Lu Daochun is from a strange background and is very famous. You can infer other things, right? Generally speaking, Monk Howren is well known or not, there are some weird ways that can be verified. For example, Gu Qingsong has scolded, Lu Daochun has provoked, Tong Yezhou has heard of it, participated in the banquet of Tianqing Shenshan in Zhuhai Cave, and there is a name on a screen wall of the Dao Xian Mountain Master's knife room. These monks, it is best not to provoke them. Gu Qingsong can scold and Lu Dao dared to provoke him, except for both parties' own Dao law creation. In addition to being good, each has some reasons why others are not envious. One master was the third master of Baiyujing. Although Lu Qin did not recognize this big disciple, the direct disciples of Lu Qin staying in the Howren world, like Chao Rong and He Xiaoyang, all treated Gu Qingsong an anonymous master. Brother is extremely respectful. The other one is Zheng Juzhong. Just talk about why the great celestial master Long Hushan went down the mountain when he really needed to carry the 10,000 fas of the fairy sword, and even carried the mark of Fang Yangping's merits with him? Demon down? Thinking that Lu Daochun is only the Jade Pure realm, but the great celestial master Zhao Tianlai is in the ascending realm, why bother to excite people like this? After all, Zhao Tianlai, with the sword and stamp on his hand, was still reminding Beidasheng, or in other words, reminding Zheng Juzhong, the demon giant who was the senior brother of Lu Daochun. This trip down the mountain by Peng Dao was meant to bring down demons, so don't make trouble to the end, forcing Peng Dao to eliminate demons together. Huang Ting shook his head and said, according to the Confucianism temple, Zheng Yugan is a student of Confucianism. Yu Jishan wondered, then what are we going to do with Gu Kan? Huang Ting was suddenly unwilling to say anything. You will understand when the celebration is tomorrow. By the way, when the celebration is over, we are not in a hurry to leave here. You can go to the Tsinjiai River with me and listen to it. Listen to the preaching of Mr. Xiao Mo, Yu Jishan asked. Preacher? Oh. The word preaching Dao is a very powerful word on the mountain, let alone, Huang Ting said. Huang Ting smiled and said, older than you, higher than you, and more knowledgeable than you. Yu Jishan hesitated for a while, nodded and said, look back and listen to see if this humanitarian law is high. Huang Ting laughed off. She remembered a strange incident. On Xianxia's side, Qin Pingan went to the wild garden at that time, and the mirrors that were forbidden by mountains and rivers were shattered on the spot. It is also the Mixifeng residence, Kalinjiang old woman Qiu Du, and girl Hu Chuling, sitting on a mat made of reeds and rushes. According to the rank of the mountain, the straw mat is just a spiritual weapon. It is warm in the winter and cool in the summer, and the wealthy generals under the mountain can also afford it. Around the straw mats, there are 4 small and exquisite red gold walking dragons, which are slender and lifelike. The dragon's head has double horns, a long snout and a thin neck, and the dragon's tail is hooked back. It is cast from slender gold bars with chiseled scales. Qiu Du carefully took out some objects and placed them gently on the straw mat. Nothing compared to this straw mat, these old treasures in the Dada Dragon Palace are invaluable, which is not an exaggeration. The dragon, who once controlled the flow of water in the world, has countless treasures as the master of the rivers and lakes. Therefore, after the battle of the dragon, the ruins of the Dragon Palace, large and small, and the broken secret realm have become 2 major opportunities recognized on the mountain. On the straw mat, there is a night pearl that is as big as a fist, and 2 ancient mirrors with gleaming light. A bronze wax stand that can hold 2 candles at the same time. Finally, there is a green whisk. In addition, there are some relatively banal and cheap treasures, many of which have not been taken out for the time being. The old woman looked kind and said softly, very vinegar if you like, just pick 2. I will give the rest to xianxia and xianxia as your apprenticeship. No matter what, we must take advantage of the opportunity of holding a celebration tomorrow to help the vinegar and xianxia ask for the identity of a disciple, even if it is not registered for the time being. If it doesn't work, just take a step back and let the vinegar and sect master Chui apprentice and become the direct disciples of the lord of the sect. The girl stretched out a palm, pressed her palm against the night pearl, gently rubbed it, then picked up the whisk, gently waved it, put it on her arm, pretending to be a fairy. The girl was overwhelmed with joy, put down the whisk and picked it up again. I played with the two ancient mirrors and finally put them all back on the straw mat, patted their palms and smiled and said, "Look at the ones that I like very much. Granny will help me choose one or two." The old woman shook her head and said, "On the path of spiritual practice, it is very important to have good or bad eyes. You have to choose your own vinegar and vinegar." Hu Chuling's eyes flickered, and finally one palm lightly patted the bamboo mat, and then pointed at the red gold dragon-shaped shizhen, smiled and said, "Grandma, I need these two pieces." The old woman nodded with a smile. Regarding the jealous choice, the old woman didn't say yes or bad. The old woman just stretched out her dry palm, grabbed a handful of silver-white mirrors, sighed lightly, wiped it with her wrist, revealing a look of remembrance and whispered, "This mirror is called a water-drawing mirror. Water is drawn from the lunar yin. The monk holds a mirror to the moon and can absorb the essence of the bright moon. The monks who practice the water method are most suitable for refining natal things. It was once a young lattice dowry." Hu Chuling pointed to the other ancient mirror with layers of golden ripples on the mirror surface. It was similar in style to the water-drawing mirror, like a pair of Taoist couples. The girl curiously asked, "Grandma, what is the mystery of this mirror?" The old woman smiled and explained, "Usually, you only need to put it in the sun to warm up the ancient mirror, just like a monk vomiting it. It is amazing, you can accumulate the sun, and in the cold winter, the monk is only allowed to pour a little spiritual energy on the mirror surface. The light shines for hundreds of miles, and it is as bright as day. It is rumored that the monk hangs this mirror in the air and walks in the light, so even if he walks on that dark road, he will be able to invade the ghosts, but no one has tried this kind of thing. I don't know whether it is true or false." These two ancient mirrors were once a real Taoist who wandered all over the world. They were not too high in rank as a gift for being a guest in Dadu Longgong. They were just magic weapons, but they were made by the real Taoist man himself, so they were of great significance. It's a pity that when the Taoist visited the Dragon Palace, the old woman was still young and could not see the land in person. Only the older Dragon Palace teacher mentioned a Taoist name, Chunyang. He also said that the origin of the Taoist master is unknown, uninhibited, and his tone of voice is louder than the sky. He once said that the whole house was stunned, and there are countless immortals in the world, but it is a pity that they are all false. The Taoist priest held his chopsticks and knocked on the wine cup to make a knock yao song. It is rumored that there was a historian on the Dragon Palace that recorded this similar Taoju. He didn't dare to take it lightly, and even specially engraved it on the extremely rare Qingshanshan bamboo slips. However, within 3 days the words on the bamboo slips disappeared by themselves. The most mysterious thing is that all the guest monks who were present here are exactly the same, but they only remember the last sentence of that piece of Daoju. If you cultivate a supreme pill, you will know that my way is not in vain. If you ask where this pill comes from, please refer to the word Chunyang. It is reasonable to say that such an expert in the game world, not to mention that it will definitely be famous in the world, it is not difficult to be famous all over the world, and there should be more or less fairy tales. But after so many years, Chiu Du has never heard the slightest news about the real Chunyang person. As for the inconspicuous wax platform, it is actually a lampshade. According to the mountain, it belongs to the kind of snail shell dojo. If you light the 2 secret candles of the Dragon Palace, the monks can enter them. At first glance they are all a small house. After opening the door, it is a large city of mirages. The only difference is a day and a night. In fact, 2 mirrors and 1 wax platform can complement each other. In the end, the 2 illusions of lanterns are equivalent to the connection of day and night. The sun and the moon cooperate with each other, and the merits and virtues are perfected. Therefore, the most suitable pair of Taoist couples on the mountain under the land immortal, practice together, and get twice the result with half the effort. Hu Chuling blinked. "Grandma, did I pick the 2 least valuable items?" The old woman waved her hand quickly and said with a smile, "No, no." Hu Chuling saw that the master was reluctant to say more, so he didn't ask much. Chiu Du, before the battle of slashing the dragon, the secular dynasty used an ancient ritual to sacrifice to mountains and rivers, buried for sacrifices to land and mountains, and Xin for sacrifices to rivers and lakes. And these 4 Qijin walking dragons used by Qiudu as Shizhen are the first female emperors in the history of Hauran, as the key sacrificial objects in the ceremony of buried in the earth and submerged in the water. However, there were a total of 18 items that year. On the side of Tongyi's Hao Dadu Dragon Palace, only one of them was obtained from the side of East Sea Dragon Palace. After that, 4 of them were collected through various concealment methods. Jian Xiutao Ran, who set up a stall on the other side of the Wanlixiu River, set foot on Xindu Mountain for the first time. Anyway, there is no acquaintance in the mountains, living alone in a house in Mixifeng, happy to have fun, and so far I have not seen the Qingshan swordsman who claims to be Qin Pingan. After Zhang Shanfeng left Luopa Mountain, he took the day by himself and took the old Longqing Intercontinental Ferry and disembarked at the Qingjingshan Ferry. Because I heard that the old Lu of Qinghu Palace is a good friend of Qin Pingan, and they are both friends. Dao sect person, I think he will not dislike his realm too much. Unexpectedly, the old Lu, the dignified Yuaning old god, is more than not disgusted, and he is so polite that Zhang Shanfeng will mistakenly think that he is the next abbot of Qinghu Palace. Zhang Shanfeng said it badly. Lu Lao Xinxian was willing to let himself go. He took him all the way to the ferry without saying a word. He also accompanied Zhang Shanfeng to board the ferry. He chatted with the ferry steward for a while and finally asked for a day. The house of the name the old just disembarked. Disembark at the next Xinjia ferry some distance away from Xindu Mountain, but there is a ferry you can go directly to the Maxin ferry, and finally Zhang Shanfeng began a trekking on the border of the dynasty that has not been restored for a few years. Anyway, it is a good time. Can definitely catch up with the sect celebration on the day of the beginning of spring next year, alone, the young Taoist priest carrying the sword box, walking in the night. Zhang Shanfeng drew out a yellow paper lantern talisman from his sleeve, twisted it with 2 fingers and held it high. The old real person Liang Shuang with his disciple Ma Xianhui left Jiquiguan in Luojing and soon found the progeny of Zhang Shanfeng. The old man did not show up directly, but found the Yuan Lingyan who was secretly protecting the road. He didn't have the identity of hiding and he smiled and said, "Poor Dao Liang Shuang, I have only met Huolong once, even though he robbed his foreign surname Dadian. I'm a teacher but I'm very happy with your master. You're the one that refers to the Shenfeng Yuan Lingyan, and you have a very heavy Dao Qi." Yuan Lingyan acted as the chief inspector of the Taoist monk. The juniors lie down at the Yuan Lingyan on the top of the mountain, and pay homage to the heavenly master Liang on Longhu Mountain. Liang Shuang said, "Huolong is so eccentric to Zhang Shanfeng. You guys who are seniors can still maintain this temperament. Litafeng is indeed amazing. The style is so good, it can almost be said to be the only one." Yuan Lingyan smiled freely and said, "If you apprehend the teacher, you will worship the real fire dragon. This is a fact recognized by the world." In fact, the master is quite disapproving of this statement, and there is no apprentice in the Ascension realm. However, a certain brother once quickly added a sentence, "Accept a disciple, then accept Zhangshan Peak," which immediately made master very happy. In the matter of cultivation, Yuan Lingyan doesn't feel that he is worse than anyone else. Only in this kind of matter he is truly inferior to those fellow students. Earlier at the Qingjing Mountain Ferry, Yuan Lingyan quietly appeared, walked to the Qinghu Palace, and had to thank Lu Yong in person. Every monk at the boundary peak traveling outside there is no shortage of etiquette. At that time, Lu Yong learned that the other party was the back of Zixuanfeng Yuan Lingyan in Beiju Luzhou, and he was speechless for a long time. Because I have been to Aquarius Island, I know a lot about the illusions on the mountains of Beiju Luzhou. Even if Yuan Lingyan is a real fire dragon disciple not to mention, it is only said that in the northern Ju Luzhou where the sword is like a cloud, all of them are a Taoist priest of Yupu realm who is not a sword repairer can be said to be, it's not a problem to fight an immortal, then Yuan Lingyan's combat power can be imagined. Liang Shuang asked, "When will I go to Xindu Mountain?" Yuan Lingyan said, "Let's see what the younger brother means." The old Jinren glanced at the young Taoist priest again and said regretfully, "It's a pity that Taoist Chunyang is not there, otherwise the weather will only be even greater for your brothers and sisters in the future." Yuan Lingyan smiled and said, "This kind of thing is not forced. What's more, in my opinion, it doesn't make much difference whether the junior brother has Lu Zu's guidance or not." Liang Shuang tweeted, "He deserves to be a disciple taught by the fire dragon real person." He speaks in one tone, but the old real person still doesn't approve of Yuan Lingyan's statement. The word pure yang means a lot. Yuan Lingyan smiled and nodded. Master actually mentioned this Taoist person with the name Chunyang, and he spoke highly of it. After all, he is a cultivator who can say that, a golden pill is in my belly, and I know that I cannot help it. And Master's evaluation of true Manchunyang is actually just 2 sentences. Lu Qi in the detailed Lujin realm, one step to the sky, one pioneered the road and the other stepped up a few steps. The Yuan Ying of the Aizhou Island Wei Shi, and the Qingming world Yao Qing's 3 corpses in this realm are inseparable. Compete. Lu Yanjin Dan is the first, unparalleled in the world. The old man and his disciple Ma Xianhui followed Yuan Lingyan far behind Zhang Shanfeng. The young Taoist priest held the talisman, a little light in the night. Before that, Chen Pingyan asked the old man on the bank of the Jilin River outside the engagement shop for a copy of Longhushan Tianshifus transmission and rituals. It was Cui Dongshan who didn't dare to say that he knew the whole process. To use Liang Shuang, a great celestial master named Longhushan, it was Qin Daoyu who had watched in advance. The old real man looked at the light in front, stroked his beard and smiled, feeling sentimentally. The person who wanders at night by Bingzhu is in the light. Sword of Coming Chapter 924. The chapter upload is late, sorry. The sky is burning with clouds, and the sunset glows thousands of miles. A dragon boat ferry named Fanma docked at a Xinjia ferry port, and a group of people prepared to change the ferry to Huangliang country. The leader of the team was a boy in Tsingyi who swaggered off the boat, with 2 sleeves flung up, and there was a young girl beside her. Behind him was a young man in a Confucian shirt, with a yellow-clothed old man who looked obedient, with a strange appearance and eagle-eyed eyes. Just because of his skinny, he seemed to be wearing an extremely loose robe. In contrast, the young man seemed the most unremarkable. They are to be invited to participate in a celebration of the opening of the peak as guests. The uncle who walks with the wind, of course, is the Yuanying realm Shuijiao in the Luapa mountain, and the Zushiteng is dedicated to Qin Lingjun. This time, Guizhujiao, who was a direct disciple of the mountain lord Qin Pingan, also went out with Qin Lingjun. Li Huai, a sage of Shanaya Academy, and the Baron Taoist pavilion known as the Nen Taoist belonged to eating and drinking, traveling far and wide. In addition to the famous Nen Taoist in Taoting, there is also another Guanyu, who is also Shanzi Yeshio of Nan Pasuajo, and the road name is Longshan Gong. Following them, or to lead the way, there are 2 trainers of Yi Daifeng, Song Yuan and junior sister Lu Runyan, with a young white fox lying lazily curled up on the latter's shoulders. 1 hour before he reboarded the ship, Qin Lingjun chose a waterfront restaurant at the ferry, intending to have a full meal, drink a little wine, and make sacrifices to the 5 internal organs temple. After all, the flicking dragon boat is its own ferry, and it's not plausible to eat and drink on it. The female sisters of Zhuchai Island have broken mouths, and if they reach the ears of some stupid girl, they will inevitably have to gossip. Qin Lingjun stood on tiptoe in the lobby of the restaurant, with his hands lying on the high counter, craned his neck to look at the wooden sign menu on the wall, and ordered dishes with the store associates. As a result, he heard that there was another place called Zenlala. It is a new business that Qin Lingjun has never heard of. It turns out that many Xinjia ferry crossings on the north and south of the continent have established precious restaurants. The monks only need to give a deposit to the gods at the restaurant to send letters to the swords of each ferry. When the restaurant gets the news, you can order food. Zendala will use the secret food box made by the Xinjia to pack all kinds of delicacies from the mountains and seas, and help deliver them to the gate of the mountain to ensure that the taste is exactly the same as the dine-in. It's just that the extra toll has to be calculated according to the landscape. The boy in Tsingyi was stunned for a long time, and Uncle Chen was eye-opening today. Can business do this? It's just that Nujiadu and Hongzhou town, a little further away, didn't open a rare restaurant? Li Huai will inevitably have some guesses. Isn't it Dong Shuijing's handwriting again? Does this kind of business really have business? Because of the large number of people, it was unreasonable to join the table. Qin Lingjun asked for a private room, started with 10 snowflakes, and soon a table was filled with dishes. Qin Lingjun ordered 2 pots of wine, raised his legs and sipped a sip of fairy wine. Turned his head and looked out the window. On the side of the ferry, several private rune boats came to the shore one after another, so that they would not run into a rampage, but without exception, they would shake their arms about the swiftness of the rune boat. Qin Lingjun glanced at the characters on the rune boat. Most of them are young men with Yingying and Yanyan. They are like having 2 characters carved on their foreheads. They are rich. As for the look in people's eyes, it's just 2 words: poor ghosts. The Taoist Nen is just for a drink and should not be careless about the matter of protecting the Tao. Greedy and misfortune? Impossible, it's just a gesture. God knows if he will be dragged into a dream by the old blind man again, and how many feet will he step on. After all, the old blind man always looks at his mood when he does things, and he is totally unreasonable. The last time that was successful, the old blind man had a rare conscience to discover that he randomly lost an ancient book on Tao Ting, which is the upper half of the mountain-making art. These days Tao Ting did not slacken for a moment, and they are all in retreat. Of course, for Tao Ting the so-called retreat is not the kind of ordinary ascension monks, who are looking for a mysterious landscape in the general sense. The nest does not move, and Yuanying and Feishing, two realm monks, have been ridiculed by the mountain as the 1,000-year king and 80,000-year turtle. Of course Tao Ting is not so shabby. Tao Ting, as the ancestor of the ancient Hushan line, the well-deserved originator of the mountain, and the head of the mountain-moving line, who is the great demon of the old throne, is completely a wild great demon of the same generation and age, because both sides follow the mountain. If you don't deal with it, the two sides will naturally have an invisible avenue dispute. When it comes to driving the mountains and moving to the mountains, Tao Ting believes that it is no worse than Yuan Shou, only in the mountain, which is much inferior. Simply put, it means moving mountains and pushing mountains. The two skills are similar, but Tao Ting is really no better than Yuan Shou in the ability to eat mountains. In a barren world where the strong eat meat and the weak are eaten meat, the two sides have a conflict, and the one that cannot be beaten can only avoid its edge and escape. Back then the young and energetic Tao Pavilion was once ambitious. He tried to build a high mountain by with his natal supernatural powers, and to speak out. It was a green mountain higher than the wild mountain Green Mountain. As for the pickling trade between Fei Fei and Yangji, it's okay to deceive ordinary monks. For the mountain monster, how can you know the inside story? Tao Ting is not rare to learn, and Zhu Wei is also a person who doesn't like to establish sections. Tao Ting had no choice but to seek for wealth and danger. See if there is a chance. At the edge of the 100,000 mountains today, steal one. Tomorrow I moved one, and when I was full I went to share with Zhu Wei. As a result, I was caught by the old blind man and became a watchdog. Those unspeakable and bleak years, I don't want to think about it. Therefore, being able to obtain half of the mountain refining art from the old blind man is a beautiful thing that Tao Ting dare not dream of. The destination of their trip was a fairy house on the mountain called Huangliangpai. In the territory of Mengliang, in addition to the Yunxia mountain, which is expected to be among the sect, there is also a xianxia sect that cannot be underestimated, that is, the Huangliang school. Reluctant, top-notch and wronged mountain immortal mansion. Now the entire territory of Aquarius Island south of Aquarius Island has countless broken hills, and the status of the sect has risen with the tide. Those enclaves that do not border the Zhu mountain are separated by a distance. If you learn from the upper sect and descend from the sect, you will be divided into uphill and downhill. The Huangliang school is the uphill of Chuzhou Yidefeng. The head of the mountain is a very old young golden core, but a sword repairer. Back then he once sent a closed disciple to seek opportunities in the Lizhu cave. As a result, the bamboo basket was empty for fetching water, and there was no gain. He gave a bag of money for the new year as a pass, not to mention the other bag was more than the money the monk. In order to get acquainted with the thriving Dali Song family, he used the remaining gold and copper money in the bag to buy a mountain on the west side of Lizhu cave. He did not sell the mountain for a low price or relocate. In fact, the head was somewhat selfish. The Jindan patriarch who later moved to Yidefeng Jimao to practice cultivation was extremely poor in the martial art. Respectfully invite the uncle to sit on the mountain. At that time the price of buying Shantao was not cheap, and it proved to be a waste of money. It was started with a very low price. A few years ago the mountain forces who wanted to buy Yidefeng with the Huangliang faction had two hands, and the bids had more than doubled or quadrupled. It was simply a priceless market. Especially when the young sword fairy of Luapa Mountain and Lu Xianyang of Longquan Sword Sect joined forces to make a fuss on Xinjiang Mountain and became famous in the first battle. Beiwepiun Mountain, Luapa Mountain, Longquan Jianzong, no matter who they have a relationship with, it is an unimaginable mountain incense love. The only minor problem is that the Beiyue night banquet always feels like a bottomless pit. However, I also saw it early anyway in the Zhongyue realm. Dashinjun Jinqing also began to play the black hand. Escape past the first day but not 15th. Waiting for the Shanshui Dibao from Shanhaizong to spread throughout Haoranjiuzhou, which is equivalent to telling the world the name and identity of the hidden official. The Huangliang pie is getting more and more headaches. If the price negotiated to purchase Yidefeng was a high price, it is now a sky-high price. The problem is that the Golden Core Patriarch's answer to Zhu Shan is very simple: not for sale. Therefore, this time the headmaster took advantage of the opening ceremony of a direct disciple ascending to the Golden Core, and secretly made a gentleman's appointment with that uncle. If he can invite monks from Luapa Mountain to observe the ceremony, Lu Shan will not mention it anymore. And the sale of Yidefeng, but if Luapa Shen declined this matter, the uncle would have to visit the Patriarch Hall to discuss the matter. Guizhuzhou asked curiously, Xiangsong, do you Huangliang school have anything to do with the Huangliang fortune land that has been removed from the 72 fortune land? Rumor has it that there was a Huangliang shop selling Forget Worry wine, on the top of the upside-down mountain. As for the title Little Song Immortal Master, Guizhuzhou has learned everything. It was the closed disciple of the old Jindan monk from Yidefeng. It seemed that senior sister Pei Chen called it out at first. Later, everyone on the side of Luapa Mountain yelled. Song Yuan smiled and shook his head and said, Miss Gua, I really don't know this. I have never heard Master talk about it. The Huangliang school is an old school with a long history. The ancestral mountain is named Lushan. It is located in Biei County, Huai'an Prefecture, Huangliang State, and is rich in golden pills. There have been more than a dozen Golden Core land immortals in history, but life and death cannot produce a single Yuaning. Of course, the so-called rich golden pill is only compared to the former Aquarius. The Huangliang faction invited the monks of Luapa Shan to participate in the ceremony, which is just a matter of giving it a try. I didn't expect that the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Chi would come to Lushan, and I didn't even think that there would be monks climbing on Luapa Mountain. It was an unexpected great honor, but it was a matter of reason and I had to try it. Unexpectedly, on the side of Luapa Mountain, a letter was quickly replied in the name of the Patriarch of Jisifeng. It was an autograph by the steward Zhu Lian. The wording was extremely polite, saying that the mountain lord had not returned now, so Qin Lingjun and Guizhou could only be asked. Jiao participated in the celebration on his behalf, and introduced the identities of the two in the letter. After receiving this reply, the Huangliang faction even convened a meeting in the Patriarch's Hall specifically for this purpose. Even if you don't say that Qin Lingjun is a nascent soul stage, it is the woman named Guizhuzhou who turned out to be a direct disciple of Qin Shanzhu. The key point is that she is still a little disciple. According to the humorous statement on the mountain, it can be regarded as half a student. Closed disciple. Lu Runyan is very familiar with the worship of that boy in the Tsing Yi Laopeishan Yuanying. The other party often finds his grandfather to drink and talk about the mountains, call his grandfather Lu brother, and call his sister Lu, a mess of generations. Grandpa said in private that this old brother Qin Dao Qianqing was amazing. It is really difficult for Lu Runyan to link that unrelenting Tsing Yi boy with a Yuaning old god. It was the girl named Guizhuzhou who was interested in Lu Runyan, as if she had only come to Luapa Mountain not long ago. It's just that the other party's background and realm are not clear. Now the mirror flowers of Yidefeng is a must. Even the Xiangshan Huangliang school has heard of it. There are very few visitors, like 2 or 3 people throughout the year, but every time they make a lot of money. Scary. Within a few years of work, how could there be 2 Guyuqin credits in the account so that in the end, Grandpa simply opened one eye and closed one eye? Anyway, granddaughter Lu Runyan never needs to show off, scratch her head and pose, and Zhou Fairy who is watching the green plums of Nantang Lake is not a mirror of love. Satiated with wine and food, Qin Lingjun finished checking out, left the restaurant, patted his stomach, and took the lead to board the ferry to Huangliangdu. Taoist Nin just wanted to rush to pay, but he couldn't compete with Taoist Jingqing. Guizhuzhou smiled and asked, since you are not at ease, why go down the mountain for a long trip? Master once said that every time Qin went to buy from Zhouqing, a guy would follow him secretly along the way. Qin Lingjun rolled his eyes and said, where is it? Guizhuzhou asked again, do you know what I'm asking? Qin Lingjun categorically said, I don't know. Guizhuzhou laughed. Qin Lingjun felt a little guilty. Li Huai was at a loss. You two are playing dumb puzzles. When Song Yuan and Lu Runyan went to another house, Guizhuzhou and the others sat down in Qin Lingjun's residence first, and she asked, are there many such friendships? Qin Lingjun nodded vigorously and said, a lot, a lot. The more the Daxian mansion is, the more frequent such things will happen. In addition to the opening ceremony of the Golden Core monks like the Huangliang school, there are also weddings on the mountain. Becoming a Taoist companion is also a major event. You have to give money to the members and then the old ancestor successfully retreats and you have to do it. The ancestor hall has accepted apprentices, and you have to change the head or the mountain master so it's broken. Mainly young children and the Dongfu realm among the middle 5 realms etc. all have to be courteous. Chen Lingjun got up and bent over and poured a bowl of tea for all 3 of Guizhuzhou, but on our hilltop side the master used to run alone, and the master was busy with everything. It is not our turn to be distracted by these common tasks. Guizhuzhou asked with a smile, will you dislike us? Not enough cards? The red tape in the vast world can only be more than these various ceremonies. Chen Lingjun laughed, just kidding, just let's go out alone. The Huangliang faction will feel like it's incense burning, and the ancestral grave is full of smoke. Chen Lingjun hurriedly added, this kind of remark, that is, to talk casually with the door closed by the family, is not serious, not serious. Away from home to give face to others is to give face to yourself. This truth, tusk, knowledge is greater than the sky. Taoist Nen nodded in approval and said, Taoist Lingjun, he is still loyal and veteran. After chatting for a few words, Li Huai took the Taoist gentleman to another house. The group of people were not adjacent to each other. Of course, it was because of the lack of money. Chen Lingjun also made an exception and did not rush to check out. Because this toll was paid by Yidefeng Songyuan for Yidefeng and Huangliangpai, Chen Lingjun had picked up the house early when he bought the boarding wooden sign at the ferry, and Songyuan had no chance to ask the ferry. The best houses. The ferry lifted off, the sea of clouds was surging, and the sun fell into a cave. When the ferry entered the border of Huangliang country, Li Huai walked out of the house and came to the stern deck. Taoist Nen quickly followed here, standing by a railing, swam his sights, nodded and suddenly squinted. Yeah, Lingyue is righteous and Xianwei borrows the magical soldier. Lushana. The landscape of the land is a bit interesting. Reflected by Daobing Xuanji, the mountain is like a person wearing scarlet clothes, and the little gourd is planted deep in the ground, and there is a longevity treasure hanging goldfish bag. The Taoist Nen looked more and more surprised, shook his sleeves, put out a hand and counted. As the ancestor of the Hushan line, he can tell the ins and outs of the world at a glance. Li Huai could only remind him in his heart, don't be messy, people have worked so hard for more than 10 generations and we are guests again. The Taoist Nen said aggrieved, my son, this is so sad to say. I speak fiercely and do things appropriately. I don't dare to compare with the sun. I am more peaceful than that of Chen. It is always between my peers. Li Huai laughed off. Taoist Nen asked tentatively, my son, I saw a place with a lot of background. Let me check it out? I don't do it but I take a close look. It can't be said to be a great opportunity. Anyway, it's the Huangliang school in Yunxia Mountain. Under his nose, so many years have passed, and the 2 groups of people have not been able to find out, and they are not within the boundaries of their hilltops. According to the rules of the mountains in the world, it is a matter for those who can. Anyway, there is still a little half a month away from the opening ceremony of the Huangliang sect. Li Huai hurriedly waved his hand and said, don't, you can go by yourself if you want to. As long as the rules are not bad, you can do it with you. Before traveling with Pei Chen to Luzhou in North Ju, it fell into a psychological shadow and almost lost money. Taoist Nen asked, really not going? Li Huai shook his head. Taoist Nen sighed, if you don't go, I won't go either. With a handy chance, the contents of the bag are gone, just like a cooked duck has been placed on the table, but the sun is not willing to serve it. Li Huai asked, is the chance not small? Taoist Nen mistakenly thought that things had turned for the better, and said in a deep voice, not small. Li Huai smiled and said, very good, I can completely give up anyway, I will only miss it. The Taoist Nen was dull and speechless. I always feel wrong but I feel that it makes sense. Taoist Nen gave a long sigh, nothing more. Taoist tender people often get a little hairy by the little girl named Guizhuzhou. Nowadays there are different opinions about the rumors of Taoist Nen. One theory says that Nangguang was done by Taoist Nen, but because of the rules of the Confucian temple, it was done concealed, so it used a haunting pseudonym. There is also a saying that the reason why Nangguangzhao was cut off by Jianxiu Haosu was because of the Battle of Yuanyangzhu, a battle with the tender Taoist who turned out to be born hurting the roots of the main road and had to return to the sect. Haosu missed it after he was in retreat. As for the third argument, Taoist Nen was indeed born in a spiritual and blessed land, and he was an old sword immortal who was not revealed. His real name was Haosu, a criminal officer of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Of course, Taoist Nen doesn't care at all about this. Anyway, it's the reputation earned by one's ability. As for the true or false, it doesn't matter at all. As long as the old blind man himself doesn't object. It doesn't matter if you say that you are the old blind man's brother, the brothers will all be successful. On the bow side, Chen Lingjun and Guizhuzhou happened to be enjoying the scenery. Because of their short stature, Chen Lingjun could only put his chin on the railing. Guizhuzhou suddenly smiled and said, "I was in the summer palace before, and the master said about you, saying that you are the one who is always rushing to check out." Chen Lingjun was a little embarrassed. He understood the meaning. The master was saying that he was stupid. Guizhuzhou continued, "Master also said that this is not stupid, but just waiting for a friend who is rushing to check out with him. Wait, it's the rivers and lakes. Can't wait, it's still the world." The mountain top of the Qingzhou school is an old site of a broken secret realm. Although it is not among the blessed places of the cave, it is also a real feng shui treasure. As one of the scenic spots, Shijianshu is rare to be so lively today because there are two groups of distinguished guests to visit the scenery. One party came from the Yu dynasty, which shared the same honor and disgrace. His Royal Highness Yu Linyu, together with his wife Zhu Sun, and a small character young slave, were a guest of the Qing Seal school. The other two were Biezhou monks, who belonged to the veritable Crossing the River Dragon. A young man dressed in black robes, Junyi, had an old dragon cloth rain pendant hanging from his waist. It is Xuanhuan, the young city lord of the old dragon city in Aquarius. There is also a young handsome man from the old Longqing Ho family, named Ho Dao. This person and the deputy head of Wuxia Academy, Ho Mian, are of the same generation in the family tree. The Ho family was the first to get on the line with the old emperor of the Yu family, and the two hit it off. And the Ho family in old Longqing was originally a vassal of the Fu family. As the host of the Qingzhou school, the ostentation of hospitality this time is not small. In addition to the head of xuanhuan, there is also Daiyuan who is responsible for looking after the scenic spot of Jianghu. In addition to the two golden core immortals, there are also the female Xiao Miaoyu who is in charge of the money of the Qingzhuan school, and a group of direct disciples of the ancestors. Those who can be there are all here, and I dare not neglect the slightest. Su Bai is the only one who is in charge of the discipline. He is a direct disciple of the ancestor Gao Shuwen, and he is busy outside at the moment, which is a mistake. After this opportunity to cling to the nobles, Gao Shuwen pointed to an ancient sword hanging on the ancient tree and introduced with a smile, "Brother Fu, Master Ho, this sword is the sword of the sword immortal Lu Fang. He traveled here early and Lu Fang was drunk. Hang here." Dai Yuan was slanderous in his heart. His own great master really knew how to be a man, and neither of the two distinguished guests should be guilty. A bottleneck sword immortal in the nascent soul realm, even in the former Tongyi's Hao, was considered a top-notch figure. What's more, Lu Fang is a mountain cultivator. Once he breaks the mirror, he has the opportunity to become the first mountain cultivator in the 5 realms on a continent. The key point is that Lu Fang is still Jiang Shangzhen's best friend on the mountain. Unfortunately, Lu Fang disappeared for many years for no reason. He didn't even show up in the battle. There was only a rumor saying that Lu Fang went to the Taoist temple in the East China Sea, as an exile immortal. Seek a breakthrough opportunity over there. Xuanhuan said his name twice in his heart, Lu Fang. Land boat? Why did you choose such an unlucky name? Xuanhuan turned his head to look at Prince Yu and apologized. It was supposed that I went to Luojing to pay a courtesy to His Royal Highness, but this time I went south across continents. I have to meet some business partners here by the way. They are all the monks of Biezhou, worried that if they meet at Luojing, the prince is now in charge of supervising the country, and it is unavoidable that this is distracted, so he has to let the prince invite the prince to do this. Sorry. Speaking of this, Xuanhuan was actually making a salute with Yu Linyu again, which was regarded as an apologize. Yu Linyu hurriedly returned the courtesy. Master Fuss, words are heavy. Nowadays, every continent knows that the master of the Yu dynasty is not only the Ho family on the bright side, but also the old Longqing Fu family behind the Ho family. Without the full and secret support of the Fu family, the reconstruction of the Yu dynasty would never have been so fast, let alone one of the top 10 dynasties of Tongyi's Hao in one fell swoop. It's just that almost half of the top 10 dynasties now have people behind the scenes like the Fu family. Therefore, Yu Linyu followed Gao Shuwen to the Qingzhuan school this time, and was mentally prepared to suffer some sullenness on Xuanhua's side. The Lord Fuqi has been in retreat for nearly 2 full years. In fact, in the years after the war, Xuanhuan was taking care of specific affairs. The two biggest rivals other than the city lord, Fu Donghai and sister Fu Chunhua, were actually equal to officially withdrawing from Laolong. The battle for the lord of the city. But when Xuanhuan was still a monk in the Sevuing realm, both Fu Donghai and Fu Chunhua were already Jindan Dixian, and they each managed a business route and they were not doing badly. But even so, Funan seems to be the most partial to the youngest son of Xuanhuan. He held an ancestral meeting before the retreat. Regardless of whether he succeeded in this retreat, Fu Nanhua will succeed him as the lord of the old dragon city after the beginning of the spring next year. And before Fu Qi retreats, he actually sent the children out. The two Earth Immortals are like vassal kings who have left Beijing. Anyway, the old Longqing family has a thick family base, and it was once in the treasure north of the old dragon city. Many hilltops and mansions were bought in various places in Pingzhou, and they were left vacant for many years. Moreover, the wife that Funan Huaming Media is marrying is the daughter of Jiang clan of Yunlin in Aquarius, so the Prince Yulinyu never imagined that the other party would be so polite on his side. In addition, there is an ancestor of the Fu family who is in charge of an attack on a half-celestial soldier. His relationship with Fu Nanhua is similar to that of a preacher on the mountain. He has been in retreat for nearly 20 years. Once out of the customs, the Fu family may have an extra jade pure realm. If the city lord Fu Qi also successfully breaks through the realm, the Fu family can have 2 upper 5 realm cultivators at the same time. Zhu Sun pulled her husband's sleeves. His Royal Highness nodded with a smile and showed her eyes that she shouldn't be too taboo. Then she asked softly, Master Fu, I heard that your Fu family is a hero, and she has a very good status in the family. Gao, even many women have served as city lord of Old Dragon City? Fu Nanhua laughed and said, It is true. Our Fu family never lays emphasis on boys, and outsiders may even think that we are not patriarchal. Zhu Sun really had a good impression of this gentle and elegant young city lord. Half of it is because of eyeballs, and half of it is because people compare people and shop around. Just talk about the Jianghu kingdom, which ranks at the bottom of the top 10 dynasties. Today, the process of gaining the throne is not without twists and turns. It seems that it involves a battle between monks from other continents and local monks. In the end, the sect of Iazhao won. The local snake failed to overwhelm the dragon and the dragon. As a result, the first and second leaders of the Jiuqing Yamen, large and small, almost half of the important ministers in the capital of Jianghu Kingdom, were secretly named by this foreign sect, and the emperor was only responsible for issuing edicts. It is rumored that the immortal master of this sect was on the side of the Minister of Civil and Military Affairs of the Jianghu Kingdom. Later, it was a deputy head of Tianmu Academy, when you personally walked to Jianghu country, and the foreign immortal mansion, which was equivalent to the emperor of Jianghu country, converged a lot. Before long, there was an old Confucian who held the title of gentleman in Tianmu Academy, and a young sage named Yang Pu in Dafu Academy, who served as the Book of Etiquette and Shaoqing of Honghu Temple respectively. Soon there was the blessed land of the Jiang's Cloud Grotto of Yuguizang again. Somehow, he lent a huge amount of money without interest to the Jianghu country for no reason, and named him by name to let the Hongyu named Yangpu, see Shaoqing, is responsible for all the expenditures of this sum of money. How can a Hongyu temple official manage the finances and taxes? Isn't it a mess? The Jianghu court had to temporarily set up a transitional official body of the Duji captain, which was regarded as Yang Puyang. Built. Yu Linyu whispered, I take the liberty to ask the current state of Master Fu? If it's in the Yuaning realm, why not invite the other party to be a national teacher of the Yu dynasty? Fu Nanhua laughed at himself, ashamed. It's just the golden core. The only 2 golden immortals of the Qingzhou school, Gao Shuwen heard the words, expressionless and composed. Dai Yuan was sullenly cheated. Such a young golden core realm immortal said that he was ashamed, so now there are only 3 golden core realm cultivators. Who is the oldest? Longest stagnation? Anyway, it's not me who wears the plain. The mother-in-law surnamed Miao frowned slightly, and finally met the cold eyes of a maidservant with a sword beside Fu Nanhua. This green seal sect sister who is in charge of money only felt that her spine instantly became cold, and she immediately reduced her expression, and she didn't dare to make any trouble. The relationship between the 2 continents adjacent to the north and south has undergone earth-shaking changes. In the past, Aquarius Island from the south were all uncles. Today, Tonggishao from the north are all ruthless people. Fu Nanhua really didn't have that leisurely mind, and deliberately ridiculed the 2 old Jindang Gao Shuwen and Dai Yuan. After all, compared to some of the monks of the same generation in the past, isn't he an old golden pill anymore? I think that among the group of people who traveled through the sky of Lizhu Cave, not to mention Jiang Yun, who is now a half-relative, but only the Kai Jinjian of Yunxia Mountain. At that time, regardless of the qualifications of cultivation and the harvest of opportunities, Fu Nanhua treated her condescendingly. Yes, as a result, even she is now Yuaning, not to mention that she had entered the Green Juniper Peak a long time ago, and she became the Yuaning, and even became the female ancestor of the Xianxia Mountain Ancestor Hall. But he has not even seen the bottleneck of the Golden Core realm. It was also fortunate that Xianxia Mountain could not be included in the sect. Otherwise he would go there to congratulate him and meet Kai Jingjian again. Fu Nanhua didn't know what she could chat with. As for someone, let alone talk about it. Fu Nanhua was upset just thinking about it. From being unwilling at the beginning, to completely giving up and then to chilling, in the end I just don't want to think about it. It used to be such an ant-like juvenile mud leg. Fu Nanhua sighed faintly in his heart, and he couldn't bear to look back on the past. Since you can't bear to look back, let's look forward. I heard that Huang Zhonghe, the master of the mountain peak of farming Yunfeng, made a great and wonderful work, which was tantamount to helping Xianxia Mountain to tide over the difficulties, so that the female mountain owner soon convened a meeting of the Patriarch Hall and passed a resolution, Huang Zhonghe about to make an exception to be the new mountain owner of Xianxia Mountain with the Golden Core realm. He is also the first mountain owner of the Golden Core realm in the history of Xianxia Mountain. The Fu family has already received an invitation letter. Fu Nanhua will return to Aquarius this time and will soon go to Xianxia Mountain to participate in the succession celebration of the new lord. Fu Nanhua and Kai Jingjian are familiar with each other, and they have never had much contact with that drunkard, Huang Zhonghe, and have never been the same. Now that several scenic spots have been visited, Gao Shuwen took people away, leaving only two groups of outsiders to chat. As the owner of the sword tree, Daiyuan must of course continue to accompany the guests. Yu Linyu chatted with Fu Nanhua again and left with his wife. Before Fu Nanhua went down the mountain, His Royal Highness Prince Yu would definitely look for Fu Nanhua in private. Fu Nanhua smiled at Daiyuan and said, "I'm here for the first time and I don't know much about the Qingzhou school. I don't know what position Master Dai holds in your school now? Is it the Master of Discipline or the Treasury?" Daiyuan replied respectfully, returning to the words of Master Fu, "I'm indifferent to learning and unbearable, but the High Head is so kind. Now in addition to managing the sword tree, there is also a green pearl well business and I am also taking care of it." Of course he didn't believe the other party's nonsense. Using the methods of the old Longqing Fu family, it was estimated that the details of his family's Qingzhou school, the 18th generation of ancestors, had long been touched. Fu Nanhua frowned slightly at first, seemingly puzzled, but quickly said, "I think it is the head of Gao who is worried that Daoist Dai has too many tasks and delays his practice." Poor Daiyuan, a heart rises and falls again. Fu Nanhua asked again, "Then Daoist Dai is on Lu Jing's side?" Daiyuan replied, "Thanks to your majesty, I am now dedicated to the insider." Fu Nanhua said, "I heard that the inside offerings of the Yu dynasty, although there is no hierarchical classification, but there is also an internal ranking?" Daiyuan cautiously said, "A total of more than 30 people, I am considered a middle and upper ranking. However, our high head is the second consecration, second only to the true guardian of Jitsueguan." Fu Nanhua gave a hum and said casually, Daiyuan's heart became hot all of a sudden. First there was Master Cui Xianxia, then Master Fu Xian, all of them were the ones who took the initiative to find themselves. Could it be the legendary double happiness? Ever since the place of right and wrong in the Taiping Mountain, I suffered from the disaster of innocence. Do you find a chance to go back to the Tapingshan site and worship the 3 sticks of incense? Looking back, it was a blessed place for me. After parting with Fu Nanhua, Daiyuan walked out a section of the mountain road to Luzhujing, and found that Gao Bai seemed to be waiting for him halfway, so he had to pinch his nose and call the uncle. As Gao Pao's direct disciple, if he only talks about the generations, Daiyuan really has to call the other uncle. But the problem is that there are mountain rules. Daiyuan is a real Golden Core immortal, but the other party is only in the Longmen realm. Both parties should at least be equal. Even in a more disciplined school, the other party has to obediently obey the younger generation. As a result, this guy, relying on his being the proud disciple of Master Gao, and his status as a master, he still saw him on weekdays. Gao Bai asked with a smile, "Senior nephew Dai, looking at the complexion is really good today, is it going to retreat?" Master said to himself in private that this fellow Daiyuan, unless his luck is extremely good and there is another chance outside the mountain, otherwise he will have to choose a child in the Golden Core realm in his life, so don't take it too seriously. Daiyuan smiled and said, "Everywhere it is said that golden pills are hard to find, and the bottleneck is even more invisible, but people are refreshed in happy events. At the end of the year, there is still a scene of blooming mountain flowers along the way." Fu Nanhua walked slowly back to the mansion where he was staying in the mountain. He habitually bowed his head and breathed a sigh of relief. He raised his head and rubbed his hands and said, "Ho Dao, next I am here. Went to Wuxia Academy to meet Ho Mian. I can only say that it is a try and there is no guarantee of success or failure. It is not easy to persuade Ho Mian to return home to worship the ancestors. As a concubine, Ho Mian had suffered a lot of grievances within the family, and it was by no means the kind of trivial thing that he suffered from harsh words. If you change to Xuanhuan, you will also choose to disassociate yourself from your family, stay away from each other in old age, and you will already be very magnanimous if you don't reconcile the old account with the Ho family." Ho Dao nodded and said, "Try it. If it doesn't work, then forget it." Ho Dao said helplessly, "If you were in Fuss family, you would definitely not have such a mess. It's not money, the problem is family style. Otherwise our house family can't compare with Fuss background. Can you not get the money?" Xuanhuan smiled and said, "You still have to tie the bell to untie the bell. If your grandfather is willing to show up in person and take the initiative to admit a mistake with Ho Mian, you will be more confident." Ho Dao felt helpless. He just shook his head, hiding for his holiness, and couldn't say anything. Every family has scriptures that are hard to recite. For the older generation, face is bigger than the sky. Xuanhuan didn't discuss the matter, so he sprinkled salt on Ho Dao's wounds. He just said a meaningful sentence: "The Ho family has saved today's wealth because of this, and because of today's predicament, it is also because of this." Ho Dao sighed. Xuanhuan smiled and said, "If you become the head of the family in the future, you will still have a chance to make up for it. After all, in the family back then, you and Ho Mian were the only ones with a bit of incense. When I went to Xuanhu Academy, Ho Mian was the only one willing to mention it. The only Ho family is you." Ho Dao nodded. "As you just said, it makes sense for Ho Mian to become the deputy head of the academy. Before the old dragon city, the Fu family and several common surnames, all transcontinental ferry boats, have been requisitioned by the Dali court, escorted by the water-walking dart, through Guishu to the wild world. There are 6 ferry boats in total: the Osmanthus island of the Fan family, the mountain and sea turtles of the Sun family, and the Fu family, in addition to the ancient treasure-swallowing whale, also has a floating mountain built by the Mo family, once known as the Little Upside Down. In fact, this was the embryonic form of the mountain boat of the Dai dynasty. However, all the big surname families in Old Dragon City, except the Ding family, seem to have an extra intercontinental ferry overnight. There was a gossip on the mountain that it was the handwriting of the Dali Song family, which was half sold and half given to you. To the Old Dragon City. Outside the Fu family, Sun Fang and Ho Ding Fan were all the surnames of Lao Longqing. After old Longqing lost that sea of clouds, the Fu family still had 3.5 immortal soldiers. In the past, the Fan family was regarded as a watchdog of the Fu family by the Ho family. But now in the entire Aquarius Island, who would dare to underestimate Fan's family, just because Fan Junmao, the sister of Fan Air, is a female monarch of Nanyue Mountain? It's enough to be on par with the Fu family. Now the Ding family is in the most difficult situation, because the biggest backer in the past was the direct descendant of the patriarch from Tonggishao in the south, and even the close disciple of the patriarch master. As a result, the Ding family has experienced 2 changes. One provokes a martial artist from a foreign country, causing the entire Feishing city to fall into a huge vortex, and the other is the monk from another continent who is nominally half the son-in-law of the Ding family. The sect Tonggizong, from the old one who held the bull's ears on the top of a continent, has become such a field as it is today. This is the case with Tonggizong. What kind of storms can a so-called cultivator have? What's more, this person's preaching teacher also betrayed the Tongya sect and switched to Yuguizong. Instead of being the master of the next sect, he was like a stone cow entering the sea, and there was no news on the Shijianhu Zhenjingzong. It is said that Jiang Shangzhen did it. As a result, the Ding family became more and more embarrassed. Xuanhuan laughed at himself. Compared with the superior and the insufficiency, it is more than the inferior. After a while, Xuanhuan suddenly laughed in his heart. "Stay by my side, I'm wronged you." The handmaid said blankly, "It's a bad life, nothing can be done." Xuanhuan choked for a while. This woman was an entourage and dead man who helped Xuanhuan recruit before her father Fujian retreats. Fu Jian did not elaborate on her roots and feet. Xuanhuan only knows that her name is Qingtao, and she is a native of Zhongtu, but she followed her master and 2 senior sisters on a trip to Tonggishao in the early years. After the incident, she separated. She was ordered by her master to go north alone, and the master asked her to find someone. Qingtao has never said her true age, but she has not concealed her strength from Xuanhuan. She is not only a martial artist in the golden stage, but also a fighter in the golden core stage. In the eyes of outsiders, Qing Tao, the maidservant, stood beside Fu Nanhua, looking like Jianghu next to her. However, Fu Nanhua always had the illusion that there was actually a piece of ice around him, which made people cold all over his body. At the end of the winter last year, Fu Nanhua encountered an elaborate and insidious assassination on his way home. It was the servant girl Qing Tao who took care of the assassin. From beginning to end, Fu Nanhua only needs to watch from the sidelines. The true foundation of the Qingzhou school lies in the mountain city known as the White Jade Cave Sky. There is a snow lake on the top of the mountain. The true half-fake Bayou Palace, Xianxia, is densely populated, and Shimon's divine predecessor can enter it only with the ancestors' Jianghu pass. The opportunities continue. The contemporary leader Gao Shuan got a fairy fate in the mountain city. However, Bayou Dongtian was self-appointed by the Qingshan school, and now it has a self-styled saying, Little Liju Dongtian. There was a thin young man squatting on the railing with extremely long eyebrows, giving people a sense of cold and sharp edge. The young man from Shanzai Xiu had a licorice in his mouth at the moment. A knife was tucked under his armpit. Next to the railing, there was a tall old man who kept coughing. The boy spit out the chewed grass roots and asked, Old Han, the water from the green pearl well, really drinking a few sips can make the woman radiant, how old is it? The old man smiled, put his fingers together, tapped 2 acupuncture points lightly to stop the coughing. You can also believe if you lie. So if you call Long Tan, there must be no flood dragon? It is the descendant of the genus of the dragon with an incorrect bloodline, and placed in the market, it is an alienation of the 5 clothes. The achievement of the road is limited, and it is hard to get into the golden core, even if it reaches the end of the road. You are a martial artist, you can see these mountain doorways with just a few glances? I haven't eaten pork and haven't seen a pig run? The young man stared into the distance and asked, Lao Han at the end of Qinghu Palace, is there really no Yuhua pill, or is he not willing to sell it to us? The old man laughed and scolded, Smelly boy, when you talk to others you have to look into the eyes of the other person. I don't understand the rules and etiquette. I want one to learn from me in the future. The boy still didn't turn his head and said to himself, Since the names of Fu Nanhua and Lao Longqing don't work, you just report your own name, Han Wanzhan of Jianghu, the great master who fisted a continent. Can bluff people. Putting it in Tongyi's Hao Han Lauer, your status in the arena is almost equal to Wu Sheng, right? Maybe even higher? The old man shook his head and said, I heard Fu Nanhua said that Lu Yong of the Blue Tiger Palace and Takeshi Yamashita have always had festivals, and the grievances are not small, so we don't want to see us martial arts, let alone I am a foreigner, even if I submit my name. Lu Yong still wouldn't take it too seriously. The young man sneered and said, Then they gave Pushen Yunkatang 2 furnaces of Yuawan for nothing? That Pushen Huang Yun, she died, he's just a back-to-the-ground martial artist who can beat you? The old man smiled freely. Of course there was no suspense in the past. It's hard to say now. The boy frowned and said, Can you still laugh? It's not a shame to lose a punch to a woman. If you hit the pay cup, who doesn't lose a punch? The old man stretched out his hand and patted the railing. Furthermore, the girl Zheng Yu from the Middle-earth God Island, the pure youth from Qingshan Mountain, the older ones, and the Lu Suiyu from the Aizhao Thunder Temple, they are all very outstanding female martial artists. Especially girl Zheng, that is Pei Qian from Luopashan, I am very optimistic about her. The young man said in a bad mood, How many times have you been chanting about her, do you bother me? The Wufu who was called Lao Han by his youth was the first person in martial arts in Jinjiazhou, Han Guanghu. In the early years there was a shadow wall on the side of the knife room of the downhill mountain master, just like Zhang Bang wanted in the government office under the mountain, and the list of rewards was plastered. When Qin Pingan visited the upside-down mountain for the first time that year, he saw 3 familiar names offered as rewards. Embroidered Tiger Chui Yang, Mo Family Ranger Su Week and King Song Changjing. Brother Chui Yang, there are as many as 6, and the reward is from 4 continents. It can be seen that the embroidered tiger back then was so unwelcome to see on Haoran Mountain. Su Chang and Song Changjing also have one, the former Zhangbang person who offered a reward, signed Lu Roshi, the Yuanjun of the Jingrong Lake and the Blue Water. As for the person who offered a reward for De Li Song Changjing, he signed Jin Jiazhou Han Wanzhan, which is the old Han in this young man's mouth. Han Guanghu smiled and said, Yu Bei Pingzu is really okay. Feng Shui is very strange. These years the old man's face is crackling and it hurts. The young man's name is Jian Ming, he is from Bei Pingzu, and he was born in a small vassal country under the Zhuang dynasty. However, the concise mountains and rivers of the old country were not broken by the monster army, but on the way to the south of the Dali cavalry in the early years. As one of the vassals of Zhu Ying's Dugu family, Xianxia, in order to block the Dali dynasty, wiped out all the elite troops. In the end, defending the capital would rather die than surrender. However, the Dai dynasty did not target Xianhua kingdom because of this. Instead, he treated Xianhua kingdom quite preferentially and allowed it to be restored. After that, the Prince Han Jingling was enthroned. Concise gave himself a nondescript three-character Taoist name, Yu Rin Song. He took out a piece of jade pendant from his sleeve and rubbed it lightly. The jade pendant is inscribed with the words Yunxia Mountain on one side, and a section of Dao Ju poems from Yunxia Mountain on the other side. It was the concise face of today's boy, and he accidentally picked it up in a snowstorm when he was a real boy at that age. A middle-aged man wearing a heavy cotton robe came from a distance, with a long sword dangling from his waist. Jian Ming immediately jumped off the railing, looked respectful, and called Mr. Zhang. It stands to reason that conciseness should call each other a master, but both the master and the apprentice have agreed that they should not be called each other outside. The middle-aged man nodded, walked to the old man and looked at the scenery of Luzhujing. The knife held by Jian Ming's armpit was said to have been given to someone by Mr. Zhang in his early years and asked him to help retrieve it. If he can successfully retrieve the sword, he promises to accept him as an anonymous disciple. As a gift to accept the disciple, the knife was presented to Gao Jian. Therefore, Gao Jian traveled to Tonghishao on his own and took a trip to the Mirage city of the Daquan dynasty early on. Then, according to the agreement, after winning, waited on the Qingjing mountain. This knife is the famous knife lost from Yao Ling's hand, the important weapon of the Daquan dynasty, the magic knife, famous spring. Mr. Zhang, since I have arrived at Tonghishao, I still can't say why you called me here? The old man was a little impatient, gathered the sound into a thread, and asked the unidentified Mr. Zhang next to him. It has been more than 100 years since the two parties met last time, and his appearance has not changed at all, but the problem is that the other party claimed to be a pure martial artist back then. At this moment, Fu Nanhua on the road in the mountains close to the maid Ho Dao. Adding Han Guanghu at the top of the mountain, concise, this Mr. Zhang. This group of them is like a dinner, friends calling friends, more and more people. Mr. Zhang smiled and said, "Don't worry, wait a few more days." Han Guanghu remembered something and asked with a smile, "Is Ma Zhuxian really beaten by that young hermit?" Mr. Zhang nodded, "It's true." Han Guanghu curiously asked, "Is this big disciple of Pei Cup unhelpful, or is Chen Pingan too good?" Mr. Zhang smiled and said, "Maybe there are both." Han Guanghu questioned, "You seem to know this young man well?" Mr. Zhang shook his head, "It's not a good idea, but I handed it in once in the early years. At that time, I went to Aquarius Island to collect an old account, which was a coincidence. I remembered that there was a young man wearing a cyan cotton robe in Xianhua country, where the wind and snow were all over the sky." Han Guanghu glanced at the long sword on Mr. Zhang's waist. "If you want me to see, the 4 difficult ghosts on the mountain together are not as good as yours. The scabbard is real, but it is a blinding trick. The scabbard is actually a straight knife. This Mr. Zhang is a person on credit. Of course, it doesn't mean that people in the world who credit knives must have sabers. The reason why he knew about the hidden sword in the scabbard was that Han Guanghu had seen it with his own eyes when he was young. He had just started practicing boxing at that time and learned some tricks to embroider the legs. After Mr. Zhang appeared, he could really count it. After starting to practice martial arts, there was the later Jianghu Han Wanzhan, and the Wufu Han Guanghu who fisted a continent." Mr. Zhang smiled and said, "I will treat you as a compliment." Han Guanghu asked, "Is the little girl next to Fu Nanhua the one who sneaked into the Yu dynasty Luo Jing and cut off the emperor's head?" Mr. Zhang smiled and said, "Where she did it, it was her master's hands." Han Guanghu said, "It's all strange people and strange things." Mr. Zhang nodded and said, "Since it is a big pattern that hasn't existed in 10,000 years, it must be the big fish that has burst out the net." Han Guanghu said, "If you have the opportunity, you must see Chen Pingan's fist. How many caddies are there in the end?" From the corner of his eye, Mr. Zhang looked at the conciseness of half of his apprentice, and looked into the distance again. "Who is the rival of the world takeover?" Chao-chen. Missing the moon and sparse the tongue, the wind blows and faints, the rustling ancient mang, the mountains and rivers are in the same light. In the next moment, the world scene suddenly turned over like a copper coin, and there was no more sycamore tree. I saw a precarious young man in white, with a huge body sitting cross-legged among a piece of golden leaves. His figure was like a lofty mountain, and the fallen leaves were like a golden sea. Young face but very old look, especially a pair of eyes, one golden and white, like the sun and the moon hanging together. In contrast, the young hidden official wearing a bright red robe and Xiao holding a mountain stick are like two mustard seeds floating on the sea. At this moment, Qin Pingan had two knives hanging on his waist, his palms against the hilt, and a night travel long sword hovering to his side, looking up at the body that was the ancient existence of the Zhenyaolu. I remember that in the wild world before, with the help of the three mountain talisman, I once passed by a Daiyue Qingshan, as if the appearance of that mountain monarch was similar to the one in front of him. The Daiyue mountain monarch with the Taoist name Biwu has 8 color pupils, draped hair and a pair of straw sandals. I just don't know what the mountain monarch Biwu has to do with this phoenix tree. According to the earliest records of the Confucian temple, it is relatively simple. On the front of those old almanacs, certain existences between heaven and earth are roughly divided into 2 types, spiritual and weird. Xiao gently rotated the green bamboo stick in his hand and smiled and said, "Friends of Taoist, the Dharma is so high it makes my neck sore." This time Xiao was so easy to talk to when he was next to the sun. If it were 10,000 years ago he would have tried to get to the bottom. In ancient times, how vast the world is, the territory is vast, and the 5 worlds added together, the territory is far from the previous scale. The number of human races is not worth mentioning in the early days. The so-called multiplication and spreading. He is just lingering and trying to survive. When the magic spells rained down on the world, monks of various backgrounds spread like weeds, and the human race as the innately most suitable head of all spirits, is simply, naturally born Taoist, so that almost all races want to become Earth. Immortal, through the 2 ascending platforms, if you want to be immortal, you need to be a human being in order to go far in the matter of cultivation. But Xiao, who was born as a demon clan, was still one of the small group of Tao men, standing at the highest point on the earth. It smiled, shrunk its figure, and became the same figure as the 2 uninvited guests. One pair of eyes returned to normal. It was dressed in a green robe. Only 2 sleeves were extremely long. It stepped out in one step, dragging 2 large sleeves and straight. When I came to the edge of the golden fallen leaves, I stopped walking half a step forward, landed straight with my sleeves and introduced myself, Dao Hao Qing Tong. It only saw the ascendant peak sword repairman with the yellow hat, blue shoes and green bamboo stick, squinting and smiling, Xiao Dao Hao Shiju. Qing Tong glanced at the bright red robe. In addition to hovering a long sword, there was also Zhang Fulu because Qin Pingan stayed in the last fantasy world for too long, and it was the 11th one. Qing Tong said with emotion, "I haven't seen this kind of sudden talisman for many years." Qin Pingan said, "Suddenly Fu? Good name." According to the records of the Book of Pills, it is called the Baiju Gap Talisman, nicknamed the Moon Talisman. Whenever a talisman burns out, a white horse jumps and disappears in a flash. Qing Tong nodded and said, "This talisman was created by Master Lu, the big talisman Wanyin bridge born out of Taoist ancestor, and it was named Sudden Talisman by Master Lu back then. At that time, Lu Qin had not yet traveled far to the Qingming world, and he was not the 3 masters of Baiyujing. He had been on boat for many years and he once left the ship to land on Tonggishao, and made a special trip to visit the Zhenyaolu, which is similar to Qin Pingan. On one trip, Lu Qin was on the way and had nothing to do, so he drew this sudden talisman. It was just made of a talisman. It was extremely rare. Lu Qin used to draw a talisman with water. The water he used was the long river of time. This sudden talisman was made by Lu Qin. The threshold is high, one can imagine. The talisman hovering beside Qin Pingan was obviously simplified by a certain expert. The reason why Qing Tong could conclude that it was not made by Lu Qin himself was because Qing Tong was on the talisman and saw another true meaning of Taoism. In ancient times, the blue bird fluttered and had the reputation of carrying the blue sky. It traveled between the heaven and the earth and passed the edicts of the heaven, while the white horse only wandered in the long river of time. Qing Tong smiled and asked, "How did you find me?" When Qin Pingan and Xiao had just entered the Zhenyao building, Xiao looked up at the sky. The sword fairy in Qingshan, who was walking behind Xiao, looked down at the ground and even stepped on the ground. The sight of the 2 of them is actually not wrong. One looked up at the real body of the sycamore tree, while the other looked down as if with the long-lived Taoist in front of him, looked at each other, and said. Qin Pingan's voice was hoarse with a slightly sarcasm, "Since you have a guess about my identity, Do you dare to open your eyes and look down? Qing Tong started to move, but turned sideways and walked on the border between the golden fallen leaves and the Taishu realm, and curiously asked, "How did you know about this?" "How did you know this?" Qin Pingan sneered. "Isn't it me who came to ask you this question?" The monks who finished this matter, apart from the Sanjiao ancestors who walked through the hometown together, I am afraid that only Lu Qin and Zhou Zi are the only ones. Zhou Zi certainly wouldn't have extra branches, and after Lu Qin left the Jianqi Great Wall, he had never been to Tongyi's Hao, but went to Beipingzu and Beiju Luzhou. Xiao Mo was a little confused when he heard it. His identity? What kind of identity does the young man have that can make Qing Tong so jealous? Earlier, I heard this Qing Tong's tone is bigger than the sky, and he obviously didn't take the status of the hidden official of the Great Wall of Jianqi seriously. Is it related? It's just not right. If it really has something to do with that person, Qing Tong would still dare to push three things like this, so it's a mystery? Kneeling on the ground and kowtow, it's over, right? One of the 5 highest, sword bearer. What is a plane tree? Do you chop wood and make a fire for cooking? Then we have to talk about whether it is worthy or not. Qin Pingan smiled and said, Qing Tong guessed that I was the ancient co-lord of the heavenly court, that is, that the ancestors of the 3 religions were very jealous of. So that the Taoist ancestor made a special trip to the town and chatted with me all the way. This is the first time I have spoken to Xiao Mo. When Xiao Mo heard the words, he was silent for a moment. It is also normal, not right, that's the way it is. Qin Pingan did not expect Xiao Mo to reply. It is not without reason that Xiao Mo can be so brisk in Luopa Mountain. With this sentence, he can firmly rank in the top 3, which is enough to compete with the phrase, Master's realm cannot be doubled, by the founding disciple Pei Qian. This is how the young mountain master wronged Xiaoma to worship. After Xiao Mo banned some of his memories and emotions, he followed Qin Pingan to travel all the way. For example, in the big city of Lijing, Xiao Mo had a similar feeling for a long time. At that time, I felt that the son next to him was very much like the person he had seen with his own eyes. It's just because of the similarity that Xiao Mo didn't think it was possible before. It's specious. Of course, all similar people, things are not real. But if the son next to him is really that person, Xiao Mo doesn't care and even looks forward to it. 10,000 years ago, Xiao Mo did not hand over his sword because of his own swordsmanship and the inheritance of Dao Fa, coupled with some personal grievances, and finally chose to talk to the master of Bixiadong Cave. That fellow Taoist was almost the same. Xiao Mo was watching from start to finish. If there is another ascent to the sky after 10,000 years, Xiao Mo is willing to follow the people around him and ascend together. After thinking about this, Xiao Mo suddenly looked so bright. How about using this uncommon phoenix tree 10,000 years ago to practice his hands? However, Xiao Mo didn't put this green tong in his eyes, so the bigger idea is to break the border, and he must quickly break the border. It is not enough to not be among the 14th realm. At the beginning, just looking up and adding Zhu Wei, you can make yourself helpless and return without success. Moreover, after 10,000 years, the number of monks in the 14th realm, combined with several worlds, can be said to be one of the few, but wait until there will be more Sanjiao ancestors, because it will be the biggest Daofa rainfall that has never happened before. Have you ever heard of a saying from Zhou Zi? Qing Tong asked and replied, I must have heard of it, and I have already thought about it carefully. With your always cautious disposition, you must have come prepared. It's the saying that only circulates on the top of the mountain. When the phoenix follows the sky and the breeze, the phoenix trees grow tall, the peach and plum spring breeze blooms, and when the phoenix dies and the autumn leaves fall, the simplicity conveys the truth, and then I see the early ancients. Qin Pingan said indifferently, I don't take it seriously. This is a sentence Zheng Juzhong said, and it is very suitable for the situation when it is used here and now. Qing Tong didn't seem to have expected such a reply. He tilted his head slightly and looked at the famous Qingshan guest. Haoran, savage, Qingming, lotus, colorful. Everyone knows this person's name. Qing Tong stopped, turned his head and asked, I have already answered the question, it's your turn. Qin Pingan said, riding a donkey to find a donkey is an obvious reminder. Qing Tong first arranged 2 donkeys for the 2 villains to watch the mountains and rivers on the donkeys. At that time, Qin Pingan and Xiao Mo seemed to say casually, if you come, you will be at peace. Where did you come? For example, there was once a supreme being, and occasionally he would follow 2 ascending platforms, pick up the level and come to the world. In fact, this world has always been an extremely hidden downhill road. After that, many one-leaf blinds can be regarded as pediatrics compared to this matter. The sycamore tree was willing to guess so, and Qin Pingan also rode a donkey downhill at the time, and was happy to borrow the donkey to go downhill. On the one hand, Xiao Mo marveled at the thoughtfulness of his son, on the other hand he was slanderous. You, the sycamore tree, cultivated for thousands of years, and got the amulet of the Confucian temple. It has no natural enemies and no worries. In the end you just have so many flowers and intestines. Qing Tong suddenly said, Qin Qing will pick you as the last hermit. It's not without reason. Xiao Mo reminded, Qing Tong, you still have to respect the boss sword fairy. Qing Tong was a little puzzled when he heard that. How come you, a monster sword repairman who used to fight Yuan Xiang and Long Jun to death, began to respect Qin Qing so much? This kind of hospitality is much more interesting than the younger generation strayed into the depths of the lotus root flowers. Qin Pingan tapped the handle of the knife lightly on the palm of his hand. For example, just talk about the first Phantom World, and as far as the chess player can see, it is a brand new world. The scene of heaven and earth will change from a freehand ink painting to a delicate meticulous painting, and at the same time from a landscape scroll with only black and white to a green landscape painting. Later, I met the old lady in the mountains, which means, there is a sky outside the sky and there are people outside the world. Therefore, when Qin Pingan calmed down the old woman and the woman with a colorful cloud spectrum, there was a saying, is the chess of future generations already so high? Qin Pingan was really too lazy to betray the opponent, so he simply exposed the layer of window paper and said bluntly, if you want to come to a game like the world, you always go to a high place. Besides, Qing Tong has a deeper intention. Qin Pingan is the one, he is a chess player, so he can have the good fortune of having a glance, the world is born. At the same time, that one is an old woman and a woman who lives in seclusion in the mountains and does not care about the world. Instead, Qin Pingan has become another one for the future generations. The two meet again. The former treats the present world with strangeness. Since when Qin Pingan separated from Xiaoma and went to read on the official road alone, the pages were blank. Qin Pingan had a natural thought at that time, feeling that the way this phoenix tree creates the world is too crude and can only be regarded as a barren landscape. If you change to yourself, only dripping water will not leak. And this in itself is an ingenious temptation and subtle hint of Qing Tong. My youth can't do it. You can do it. It's just that Qin Pingan always feels unclear about the way, as if Qing Tong is in an extremely contradictory situation. He has long believed that he is the one, but he can't believe it, or he doesn't want to be the one. Qin Pingan, who was crouched, stared at the Qing Tong in the distance and asked nonchalantly, what strength are you now? Xiao Mo knew it would be very interesting when he heard it. Because Xiao Mo knows that his son rarely confronts a senior on the mountain, and directly uses the word you as an opening statement. So next, it will definitely not be a point-to-point competition. Qing Tong smiled and said, it's probably equivalent to an ascendant realm, half a martial artist will arrive, and will know a few big charms. Qin Pingan nodded. Between the two, a long bright red line appeared in an instant, as well as a lingering speech. Then I don't have to worry about killing seniors. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.